There's a great story of two lumberjacks where every morning they start chopping wood at the same time, and every day they stop chopping wood at the same time. And every day one of the lumberjacks disappears for about an hour in the middle of the day, and every day he chops more wood than the other guy. And this goes on for months. And eventually the one who works all day, he says, I don't understand. Every day we start at the same time. Every day we stop at the same time. Every day you disappear for about an hour in the middle of the day, and every day you chop more wood than me. Where do you go for that hour? And the other lumberjack looks up and goes, oh, I'll go home and sharpen my axe. If you take an infinite mindset, it's not about how much you can get done each day. It's how much you can get done over the course of a career or over the course of a lifetime. You got to take vacations, which means you turn off your email and you turn off your phone and you do not connect to the office. Go sharpen your axe. Take a Friday afternoon off. We have something called duvet days in our company where you wake up in the morning and you just can't do it. And it's not like vacation days where you plan ahead, and it's not like sick days. Like you're not sick, you just don't want to do it. You're just not feeling it and you can't do it. And you do it responsibly. You can't leave your team in the lurch, obviously. You have to exercise responsible freedom. But we give people an opportunity, instead of lying and pretending that they have a stomach bug because they just can't face the day, that they can just call up and say, I'm taking a duvet day, and everybody goes, go, we got you, go.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because when I started my first business, I really struggled to believe in myself. I was making $300 a month and quit on my business partner. And the thing that saved me was watching the stories of successful entrepreneurs. They gave me strategies as well as hope and belief that just maybe I could do it myself as well. And I hope that this video here today helps you get a little bit more belief in yourself, because I still need the videos for myself today too. So today let's learn from one of the best, Simon Sinek, and my take on his top 50 rules of success. Enjoy.
I can tell you what I went through, which is what set me on the journey to sharing the message of the why and helping people find theirs. A why is like a compass direction. It tells you where you're going. We can live our lives by accident, which is kind of like getting in a ship and just sailing, or getting in a car and just driving. You'll absolutely see some amazing things. You'll stumble upon some amazing experiences, but you don't really have a sense of where you're going, any sort of direction. In other words, what's it all for? What the why does is it provides a path, it provides a map or a compass. So you will still have some of those amazing experiences, but now they have value and worth, and they're taking you towards something else. It's a journey towards something. When I learned my why, I had this tremendous calm come over me, a sense of my confidence grew, a sense that my life had more meaning than I thought it had before, and I had now the choice, a new way of viewing decisions, a filter, through which to make decisions, which now I would ask myself, does this help advance my why or not? Does this help me stay on the path that I'm supposed to be on, or is this going to be a random adventure? So the why provides focus, direction, meaning, and confidence.
The best leaders actually are the best followers, even if they're at the highest levels of the organization. They're still in service.
Right. It may not be to a person, but to a cause,
to a cause,
mission,
an idea, a vision,
God, something.
Whatever it is, there's still some sort of something that they're beholden to, and they're devoted to, and they're in service to. So followership is a thing, not to belabor the Marine point, but. Marines, when they evaluate their leaders, they're looking for good leadership and good followership. So, for example, when you go through OCS, Officer Candidates School selection, when somebody's for a task, chosen to be the leader of that group for that task, the Marines are watching the others as well. So they're looking to see that everybody's contributing ideas, and they're looking to see that leader takes in those ideas but is decisive, and they're looking to see that the members of the group, if their idea isn't picked, they still give their all to see that the leader's idea is successful. And if it fails, give it their all to pick up the pieces and see what they can do, as opposed to going, I told you, should have gone my way.
Right. I was right.
Or sabotaging because their idea didn't get picked.
Wow. So they go all in.
So good followership is as important as good leadership. That we respect that when a decision is made, we will give our blood, sweat, and tears to see that the decision our leaders have made will be successful. And if it fails, we will help pick up the pieces, because that's the deal.
Having a sense of purpose, cause, or belief for our work is what gives our work and, frankly, our lives meaning. When we die, nobody wants the last balance in their checking account written on their tombstone. Nobody wants the last title on their last business card on their tombstone. That's not how we want to be remembered. We want to be remembered for the kind of person we were in the lives of others, devoted mother, loving father, these kinds of things. And we want to know that our work had an impact in something bigger than ourselves. It's a very normal human thing. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't start to think about those things until later in their lives. And I've heard this. I usually hear this from senior executives, believe it or not, where they say, I've had great success and I've done all these things, but I don't want my life to end on this chapter. I would feel like I've done something wrong, and they want to make sure that they do something powerful and impactful in the lives of others, that's how they want to close the book on their lives. What I love about this young generation is they're starting to think about those kinds of things now. It's not unique to a young generation. Everybody wants their work to matter and have meaning. I think our young generation is just more vocal about it, which is wonderful.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there.
So you say, I've met this person that I really like. How do I build trust? Well, you don't tell them all your secrets on the first day, right? We all know that you have to be vulnerable, but there's a timing, and it's a dance, and it's giving somebody a little extra responsibility and seeing how they do. And if they screw up, instead of yelling at them, be like, all right, try again. That we treat mistakes as learning opportunities rather than, and a mistake is only when you keep repeating the same error and you haven't learned anything. Where we practice empathy. You build trust with empathy as well. So empathy in business looks like this. Here's a traditional scenario. Somebody picks up the phone or walks into their office when we did that, and says, your numbers are down for the 3rd quarter in a row. We've had this conversation before, and if you don't pick up your numbers in the 4th quarter, I don't know what's going to happen. Right? That's pretty normal. Here's empathy injected into that scenario. Hey, your numbers are down for the 3rd quarter in a row. We've had this conversation before. Are you okay? I'm worried about you. What's going on?
No.
Right? Where it's about the person, not the performance. And so again, it goes back to that listening, and you are not listening until somebody else feels heard. Those things, seeing someone as human, understanding that we all have stresses and strains and egos and insecurities, and we bring all of that to work. And though we still have to be emotionally professional, you can't sit in a meeting like this because you're having a bad day. That's emotionally unprofessional. Though we still have to be emotionally professional, we're still human beings.
Yeah.
And a good leader recognizes that. And by the way, somebody on a team recognizes that too. You don't have to be a position of authority to be a good leader. Because those who may be higher in rank than us are also filled with insecurity and fear and stress and strain and ego and all that. Right? And it's okay to go up the chain of command and say, hey, are you okay? You were really hard on us in that meeting today. Instead of labeling them an asshole, be like, are you okay? And by the way, and that's the dance. It's like any relationship. It's not expected for one person in an interpersonal relationship to do all the listening. It's a dance, and it goes backwards and forwards. And you meet empathy with empathy, and you meet listening with listening. I think very often companies can risk becoming reactive to things that happen in the marketplace, so here's a great example, right? Let's use a real life example. Blackberry was a really fantastic company who built a really fantastic product with a really clear sense of vision, which is we make strong, secure, extremely reliable products. And if you remember, if you ever had a Blackberry, you could throw that thing across the room, drop it on the street, and it just didn't break. It just kept working. It was the most reliable product on the marketplace. You could type on the full QWERTY keyboard without even looking down. You could send a whole email, and governments and big businesses loved it because it was really secure and really reliable. Then the iPhone showed up, and the iPhone was the new shiny object. And BlackBerry, instead of sticking to their core and their beliefs, became distracted by the shiny popularity of the iPhone, which is a completely different animal serving a completely different audience. And they started trying to copy iPhone. So they started putting apps on their Blackberries, which what did it do? Made it slow and sluggish. Then they started coming out with flat screens. You're not going to make a better iPhone than an iPhone. And they basically destroyed their company because they completely went off the reservation and abandoned their fantastic cause. There could be two marketplaces where you have the shiny object of the iPhone that we use in our personal lives, and our companies prefer that we use a BlackBerry because it's reliable, it's safe, and it's really, really strong. And we could have had two dominant players for two dominant reasons, like a PC and a Mac. Two dominant players for two dominant reasons, for two different reasons. But they didn't. They got distracted. And I can imagine that their business people were saying, business is moving at light speed. We have to react. Or we can work to advance our cause in a different way and not become distracted. And that's part of the hard thing, which is, are we stuck in our old ways? Or are we actually sticking to our long-term vision? That's part of the difficulty of business, to know the difference.
I would sort of reject the concept of blunt honesty. You can be honest without being an ass. Do I look fat in these jeans? I like the other jeans better. That's an honest assessment without making somebody feel bad, for example. And we also have to get good at evaluating someone's personality. Some people are more sensitive than others. And so a good leader is able to adapt their style and how they offer information so that sometimes they have to be a little more polite to some and they can be a little more blunt with another because their personalities can take it. What we want people to do is hear the feedback, hear the input, and it's based on how they receive it, not how we like to give it. We have to be the adaptable ones as leaders. But he's absolutely right that good leadership starts with care. And I hear this all the time, unfortunately, which is, as a leader, I didn't get to choose my team, so why should I care about them, or why should I trust them? I didn't choose them. Well, you didn't get to choose your children. You love them, and this is one of the risks of leadership. Leaders have to take the risk to care. They have to take the risk to trust first. I've never in my life heard a great leader say, "Prove to me why I should trust you," to their team. It's the opposite. A leader takes the risk to trust, and it's the team who says, "Prove to us why we should trust you." That's the correct hierarchy. So yes, you do have to care. You want to see your people as human beings first. They are not the problem. They may have a problem, and inject a little empathy into the organization. This is what reflects care. So for example, I'll give you one example. So here's a pretty normal scenario. Somebody walks into an office and says, your numbers are down for the third quarter in a row. We've had this conversation before. If you don't pick up your numbers in the fourth quarter, I don't know what's going to happen. Empathy changes that. You walk into their office and you say, your numbers are down for the third quarter in a row. We've had this conversation before. Are you okay? What's going on? I'm worried about you. That's empathetic. That's the expression of care, that we recognize that someone may have a problem, but they are not the problem.
I'll give you a personal example. The person who sold me this property, it was the seller's agent.
Oh, okay.
Right? He was charming and nice and wonderful and lovely and helpful and all the things that I would expect. And I warmed up to him and he was apparently helping me. And then I remember distinctly at the closing, he sat there with no personality. All of his charm had left. All of his friendliness had gone. He barely engaged with me. He just wanted to be there to collect his check so he could get out of there. And I realized it was all fake. It was all for show. It was all to butter me up so that I would simply sign on the dotted line. And as a result, I will never work with him again as a buyer or a seller. I'll never list with him ever. And I probably will never work with that company again because I realized they just saw me as a number. They never saw me as a person in the first place. He was an old white guy. I mean, that should tell you a little bit of something as well. That's sort of maybe how he was raised in the industry. And by the way, the mortgage broker was no different. He was charming and wonderful and lovely and helped me get a great rate, et cetera, et cetera. And then I remember after I closed, he called me and said, "Congratulations." And I said, "Oh, thank you. That's so nice of you." And he called me just to congratulate me on closing on my house. And then the first thing he said to me was, "And if you know anybody who's looking for a mortgage, I'd really appreciate the recommendation." He never called me to congratulate me. He called me because he wanted the referral. Like, give it a breath. You know, like call me and congratulate me, and a week later ask me for the referral.
And see, let me tell you what sucks about that. Can I say that? What sucks about that totally is that one person colored your entire opinion.
But this is finite versus infinite.
Okay.
He could only see the transaction. He could only see get business, get more business. Get business, get more business. What he didn't understand is he's dealing with a human being, and the more that there's a relationship, I will gladly recommend him. I will gladly introduce you to my guy, right? Now I'm completely agnostic, because if you're going to treat me like a transaction, I'm going to treat you like a transaction. If you're going to treat me like a transaction, I'm going to squeeze you to get more money out of you. I want a lower rate. I'm going to squeeze the agents. But if you treat me like a human being, I'll gladly pay a higher rate because I want to work with you. And that's what infinite-minded players understand better, which is you don't have to be the cheapest. You don't have to have the lowest rate or the lowest price if you have a great relationship. What does it mean to live an infinite life? Clearly, our lives are finite. We're born, we die, we come, we go. But life is infinite. The game of life will continue with us or without us. Which means every single one of us has a choice. We don't get to choose the nature of the game. Life is infinite. We don't even get to choose if we want to play in the game or not. Once you're born, you're in it. We get one choice. Do you want to play with a finite mindset, or do you want to play with an infinite mindset? To play with a finite mindset means waking up every day and say, I'm going to be the best, I'm going to be better than everybody else, I'm going to accumulate more power, more responsibility, more money, whatever it is, whatever your metric is, I'm going to get more than anybody else. Me. And when you die, you take none of it with you. Or we can choose to live our lives with an infinite mindset, which means I'm going to leave this world, this school, in better shape than I found it. It means I'm going to devote my life to see that those around me rise. And we know that we're living with an infinite mindset because our obsession is seeing that we have an impact on the lives of the people around us. We've all had teachers, and some of you are those teachers, where 20 or 30 years from now, I can go to one of your students and say, you're a remarkable human being, you've accomplished so much in your life. How did you become the person you are today? And they will tell me your name. We all remember the teacher who believed in us. We all remember the teacher who had our backs. We all remember the teacher who saw something in us that nobody else saw. We've forgotten all the others, but we remember those couple. And that's what it means to live with an infinite mindset. It means we divert ourselves to that mindset for everyone in our lives. That other teachers will say that about us. Other principals will say that about us. Other students will say that about us. Our friends will say that about us. I am who I am today because of you, and I will commit to live the same life that you taught me how to live. And you will literally live on beyond your own lifestyle, your own lifetime. That when you're gone, others will carry your work for you. This is what it means to live an infinite life, and it is just a choice. There are many people in your industry who talk a good game, they talk about relationships, but let's be honest, it's bullshit. They just want to make the transaction and move on, and they pretend that they care, and they pretend it's, you know, that they care about the relationship, when the reality is it's one and done and on to the next. And that's what happened to me. I had a mortgage broker. He sold me a mortgage. He was recommended to me. That's how most of us meet somebody, you know. And he was very nice and charming and was there with me. And then my sale went through, and he called me up to congratulate me, and I was feeling all warm and fuzzy towards him. And then as soon as he congratulated me, he said, and if you can recommend me to anybody else, I'd be really grateful. Like, and he wasn't calling to congratulate me. He was calling to remind me to put in a good word for him somewhere else. Like, if he actually cared about me and my house, then he would have just called me really excited that I got my house. And if he wanted something from me, he would have waited a week or two to ask the favor. But it became abundantly clear to me, I'm in the human behavior business. He never called me because he cared about me. And by the way, I will never, ever recommend him, because I realized that I was just a number on a spreadsheet. And so if you actually care about building relationships, then actually build relationships. You know, I remember when I was starting out in my career, I had a little marketing consultancy, and I came from an industry that pretended that they were good at everything, the marketing world. Like, literally, they pretended they were good at everything, whether they were or weren't. And when I went off by myself
it was important to me to be honest. And clients would come and talk to me and say, we want to hire you to do all these things. And I'd say, I'll do that one, I'm really good at that, pretty good at that. I like doing that. That I'm mediocre on, that I suck at. I highly recommend you hire another company to do that, and I'm happy to partner with them. And it made them want to do business with me more.
Because you said no.
Because I told them what I was good at and what I was bad at, and where I was super honest.
Yeah.
And we've all had that experience where you want to hire somebody and they go, let me introduce you to somebody. It happened to me recently.
Yeah.
I wanted is like something silly.
Yeah.
You know, I needed wallpaper.
Yeah.
He highly recommended. I called him up. He came. He gave me a quote. He's like, you know what? I'm not the best at this thing, and he gave me the number of somebody else.
Yeah.
Now all I want to do is work with him again, and I keep giving out his phone number to other people, even though I actually never did work with him.
Yeah.
Because what builds a relationship is an honest broker. Honesty is such a hard thing to get, especially in a transaction business, especially in a commodity business, because it is just volume and numbers.
Yeah.
And that when you actually find an honest one, all you want to do is help them build their book of business, even though you may never do business with them. And that's what a lot of finite-minded folks in your business don't get, which is you may never sell me a mortgage, but I'll become your biggest champion.
Call your friends you love, the ones who you know that if you called them at 3 o'clock in the morning, they would answer the phone. Do not do this with family. It doesn't work. Those relationships are too close. Do it with the friends you love and ask them the simple question, why are we friends? And they're going to look at you like you're crazy because the part of the brain that controls feelings and behavior doesn't control language. Ironically, you stop asking the question why because the question why is an emotional question and it elicits emotional responses. After your friends say, why are you asking me this? You switch to what question? What specifically is it about me that I know that you would be there for me no matter what? And it's going to be very difficult for them and they're going to struggle. Don't help them. Don't let anybody else help them. You have to let them go through the uncomfortable process and you have to play devil's advocate. So they'll say things like, I don't know, you're funny, you're smart, I can rely on you. And you say, good, that's the definition of a friend. You have that with all your friends. What specifically is it about me that I know you would be there for me no matter what? You're going to keep at them and eventually they'll give up and they'll stop describing you and they'll start describing themselves. And this is what my friend said to me. They said, I don't know, Simon. All I know is that I can just sit in a room with you. I don't even have to talk to you and I feel inspired. And I got goosebumps. So what they did is they articulated my value in their lives and I had an emotional response. So you'll get to the point where they'll say something that you will either get goosebumps or you'll well up with tears or something will happen. You will have an emotional response. You won't get the exact words of your why, but you'll get in the ballpark. What you'll find is if you do it with multiple friends, you'll get very similar, if not the exact same answer, because the value you have in their lives is the same. It's you. So that's a fun way to find your why.
I think people they create a dichotomy, a false dichotomy, that they have to either choose service or individual success.
Right.
That those two are somehow mutually exclusive. And that service means living a life of suffering, which is nonsense. Right. And then you hear these silly sort of projections like, I'm going to do well so that I can do good. So I'm going to put myself first, and then eventually I'll do good for others. You know, a friend of mine who's a philanthropist, someone came to him for advice on philanthropy. And this was a former CEO of a very large company. And my friend asked him, so what are you most proud of in your philanthropy? And he said, well, you know, we started this charity in the inner city where we help kids go on to college. And he said, that's amazing. You know, how many kids have you helped? He said, 15. He says, is that the proudest thing you've done, you know, in your life? He says, yeah, I'm really proud. And my friend said, so let me understand this. You're proud of 15 kids you helped go to college. Meanwhile, you destroyed the lives of the 60,000 people who worked for you. You know, like that's what happens when you do well so that you can do good. You put yourself at the center of the equation, and then eventually you'll try and even the scale so you can feel good before you die. And the reality is the opposite is true. Do good, and you can also do well. Right. But doing good should not be something that we save for our retirement. Doing good is something that we can do every day, and it's remarkably easy. I mean, what your neighbor did for you just by looking out his window was good. Saying hello, asking somebody, how are you? And actually caring about the answer, saying please and thank you. You know, I mean, these are very, very little things that cost nothing that make other people feel like you saw them, that they matter, that they exist. And that is all steps we take to
to doing good. And of course, it can grow from there. It can scale from there.
To me, art is like a gift. You know, if you have capacity, if you have talent, if you have grit and hard work and you want to produce, gifts are supposed to be given. So what's the point of giving a gift if no one gets it, right? What's the point of producing a symphony if no one gets to hear it? So I think reception is important to give the art point, meaning as opposed to pointless. You know, otherwise you're just decorating your home. Now, we could have a debate whether I'm receiving it myself, right? So we could definitely debate that. But I think, and maybe this is just the romantic in me, it has to be enjoyed. And maybe one person is fine. Maybe if you hang it in your own home and it's just for you, that's fine too. But I think art has to be enjoyed. Otherwise, what's the point, you know? Otherwise, it's just therapy, you know? I'm just painting for therapy. And we all do things like that, you know? Art has to have another human being involved. To me, art is about a relationship, right? You can't call yourself a romantic or somebody who chooses to love another if nobody ever feels your love. You know, I think art is it's a type of language, right? I know people who are the world's worst communicators when it comes to their emotions when you have a conversation with them. I've dated some of them. But given the opportunity to write, it's magical. And the feelings pour out on the page in an eloquence like I've never seen. And as everyone here knows, great art in some way, shape, or form is always personal or semi-autobiographical, right? It's too hard to write pure fiction. You know, we put ourselves in it because it gives it a sense of reality, and it's what makes us passionate for the subject that we're tackling. I know dancers who, you know, you meet them and they're like this, but as soon as they start dancing, you realize it's all there. So art is language, and if no one hears you, you know, if a tree falls in the woods, you know, if no one hears what you're saying, is it worth saying anything? They're just thoughts. So what's the point of writing a play that never gets shown? It's just a thought, you know? It's just an intention. So yeah, no, I think it must be shared. It's one of the ways in which people communicate.
What if our why scares us? And we fear that people won't see it? Do we abandon it or do we just go for it? Okay, so there's two thoughts there that are worth unpacking. Okay, if other people don't see it, okay, let's deal with that first, because I think that's a little simpler. If other people don't see it, then the question is, are we showing it, right? And so many of us, all of us, especially at various times, we're all lying, hiding, and faking at various points, right? Somebody asks a question, you know, that makes us uncomfortable in a public forum. Sometimes we agree to something. We say yes, even though it's not true, because we just don't want to embarrass ourselves. We're very often inauthentic. Plus, we live in an Instagram, Facebook, TikTokable world. We're all presenting ourselves and curating ourselves as how we want to be. So we're really good at showing people the kind of person we want to be. It's kind of ironic as well, if you think about relationships. You know, we present ourselves as our best selves, but it's only really when our vulnerabilities and insecurities are revealed can love exist. That's that magical authenticity. So I would argue that if the world doesn't see who you are, you know, are there ways that you can share it with the world in a way that is inspiring to them and authentic to you? How you show up, you know, sometimes the clothes you wear, sometimes it's silly stuff. You know, I would often wear brightly colored ties in college. I know, a little nerdy, but one, because it sort of was a reflection of my independence. I didn't dress like everyone else, but it also made people smile. I would catch them seeing my tie, and it would make them smile, and I liked that. And so there are lots of little things we can do personally to bring our why to life. Now, what I'm really interested in is what you said, Andrea, when you said, "What if our why scares us?" Now, if it's actually scary because it's dangerous or difficult, then maybe it's not fully our why. If it scares us, but because we are afraid that others will judge us for what it is, like this is truly who I am, this is why I wake up out of bed every morning, you know, then I think you have to go for it. Now, the question is, do you have to jump in the deep end? I think that's a question of your own risk tolerance. I think there's nothing wrong with wading into the water, starting in the shallow end. I mean, think about it. Look what I do for a living. Inspire people that do the things that inspire them. Like, how corny and cheesy is that?
right? Like, I'm fully aware of that. When I first started talking about it, people were like, well, that's cheesy. I'm like, I know. And so but I still would do it. And was it a jumping in the deep end? No, I would dip my toe and I would test things out, and I would try things out and I'd see how it was received. And sometimes it went well and sometimes it didn't go well. I was learning to swim with my Y, as basically was my Y floaties. I was wearing Y floaties. That's what I was doing. So yeah, I think if it feels right, because that's the test of a Y, does it feel right? Does it feel like who I am? Does it give you chills or goosebumps, or does it make you well up when you think about it? Does it excite you? Then it's probably accurate. And yeah, then you're going to have to at least get in the shallow end. You dip your foot in and try using it in certain places. And as you get more comfortable, you'll learn to swim. So my favorite definition of culture is culture equals values plus behavior. And so you have to have a clear set of values first. And innovation, honesty, these aren't values. Those are the things we write on the wall, but those are nouns. And if it's values plus behavior, it's things we want people to do. Everybody thinks they're honest, yet everybody tells lies. So the value isn't be honest, the value or honesty, the value is tell the truth. The value isn't innovation. You can't walk into someone's office and say, a little more innovation today, please, right? You can't innovate, you can't execute on innovation. It's not an instruction. But you can tell people, look at the problem from a different angle. Like, that's something you can do. So and by the way, your values are not aspirational. They're not a bunch of executives sitting at an offsite, cutting pictures out of magazines and saying, this is the company we want to be. Your values are who you are when you are at your natural best. Your culture already exists, but you're not necessarily always operating at your natural best. And that's as true for companies as it is for individuals. And so to uncover your values is not aspirational. It's a process of discovery. And then you can write down this. I've never seen more than 5, weirdly. Don't understand the biology. But when you start getting more than 5, they start to overlap enough that you could probably eliminate one of them, which I think is interesting. But there's at least, there's at most 5 values, 3 to 5, that are who you are when you operate at your natural best. And now the question is can you develop recognition, rewards, incentives to promote those values? Are you talking about those values? Are you hiring to those values? Are you firing people who may be high performers but refuse to live to those values? Because then what you're doing is reinforcing to the rest of the company that the values matter more than anything else, which is really important. Because if we talk about values, but then all we do is promote toxic team members who are high performers, and we've all had this happen, where sometimes even management knows. They're like, that person is a real asshole. They're like, I know, but their numbers are so good, right? And then we let them be. And so that sends a message to the rest of the company that we're talking about these values, but we don't actually believe it. And so we don't necessarily have to fire that person, but we do have to coach that person. When my career was just getting going, and I was a speaker, which, by the way, was not my chosen career. I fell into it. There is I've forgotten the name of the organization. I think it's called the Meeting Planners Association of America, something like that, where basically all the people from all the corporations and conferences who hire the speakers, like that's their job, they have their own conference. And so to get invited to this thing is like, it's like American Idol. Like if you do well, you get a career for the rest of your life because everyone in the room will want to hire you for their conferences for the rest of years. And if you bomb, they all know who you are and you will have no career, right? Like that's, so like, I see where this is going. I'm like, I've done this a bunch now. I'm relaxed on stage now. I got this, and like, this is one of those events that makes every speaker nervous. And it's in this cavernous place. Ironically, it was like the worst venue. It was like, it echoed. So you'd stand on the stage talking, you could hear yourself. Anyway, during my talk, I'm doing Start With Why. This is back in the early days. I got this, done this a million times, and don't know what happened. I lost my train of thought. Okay, I know this. I've been through this from before. So I went quiet. You usually find my place, and then I pick up again. Like, I know how to do this. I've lost my train of thought before. I went quiet, and nothing happened. Nothing came into my mind. I had nothing. And now I panicked. And as soon as the panic sets in, now now all rational thought disappears. And now I start sweating and my heart starts pounding and I got nothing. I got nothing. And I look at my pad and I look at the audience and I look at my pad and I look at the audience. And then I turn to them and say, have you ever had that feeling where you forget what you're talking about and everything collapses? Your heart's in your stomach, your heart's pounding, you start sweating, your hands get clammy and sheer panic. And they're all smiling. I said, I'm having that right now. Oh. I said, and I got to tell you, it feels fantastic. I said, because I do this so much, sometimes I forget to be present. And I said, right now, I feel completely alive. I said, I feel totally present and totally with this. It's as much as as crazy it is, this is amazing. I said, okay, I need someone's help. Can somebody please tell me what I was just talking about? Because I do not know what I was talking about. And they all erupted in applause. I got more applause for that than for the actual speech. So funny. But the point is that in every cloud there is a silver lining. In everything that happens to us, there is goodness.
A U.S. Marine told me the first criterion for being a leader is you have to want to be one. And if you look at the way the Marines select their leaders, select their officers, it's different than with their enlisted corps. So if you enlist in the Marine Corps, you go to Paris Island in the east, or you go to San Diego in the west to boot camp, and they will make you into a Marine. Yeah. That's what it says. We make Marines. Yeah. And if you change your mind, you're going to be in the Marine Corps, whether you like it or not. Yeah. There is no changing your mind. Yeah. Once you sign on the dotted line, you're in. Yeah. In the officer corps, it's different. If you want to be an officer in the Marine Corps, you go to OCS in Quantico, Virginia, and it's a 10-week training, and you only have to stay in the first 4 weeks. For the next 6 weeks, you can drop out at any time for any reason. Yeah. And the reason is because if you don't want to be a leader, they don't want you. Yeah. They give you the choice. Leadership to me is like being a parent. Everybody has the capacity to be a parent. Doesn't mean everybody wants to be a parent and everybody should be a parent. Right. Leadership is the same. Everybody has the capacity. Yeah. Doesn't mean everybody wants it and doesn't mean everybody should. Yeah. It comes at great personal sacrifice. It means you have to constantly worry about other people, like being a parent. Yeah. You have to love them whether you chose them or not. Yeah. Your team. And there are skills to being a parent. And everyone who's ever had a child starts reading books when they find out that they're pregnant for the first time. They start asking their friends, they start asking their parents for advice, and it's constant. Whether the kid's struggling at school or struggling at home or having a good time, it's all the, it's like I hate hanging out with my sister and my brother-in-law when they're with their other friends who have families, because all they talk about is kids. Yeah, right. Well, leadership's the same. Yeah. Leadership's the same. The great leaders that I know are all students of leadership. They're obsessed. Yeah. They're constantly talking about it. They're reading books about it. They're watching talks about it. They're reading articles about it. They get together. It's the topic of conversation. Sure. And so, if you want to learn the skill set, number one, you have to want to do it, and B, you're going to have to do some work. Yeah. It takes effort. I don't think you can motivate the unmotivated. I don't think you can motivate people. People either are motivated or unmotivated. I think you can inspire people. You can motivate people with sticks and carrots, offer them bounty or threaten punishment, and you'll get behavior that you want. Is there loyalty? Is there love? Absolutely not. Usually, when people are unmotivated, it's not necessarily them. It might be the situation they're in. Maybe they don't belong in the culture. Maybe they feel unseen or unheard. Maybe they're scared. Maybe they're unprepared. So we have to, when somebody's unmotivated, let's not label them as unmotivated first. What are the 20 other things that it could also be? Let's start there. Now, are there some people in the world who are unmotivated? Absolutely. You hired them, which means you bear some responsibility if it's time to transition them, to help them find another place where they're going to be a better fit. We can't yell at them and call them stupid and unmotivated and push them out the door. We have to bear some of the responsibility. We hired them. And if we made a mistake and hired somebody who's a bad cultural fit, then we have to take care of them and help them transition to somewhere where they're going to be a better fit. I think that if we only focus on motivating people, and that's a factor, then you're only going to get very finite thinking. An excessive amount of motivating things, like hit this number, get this bonus, you'll get a motivated employee pool that doesn't care about each other, might stab each other in the back, and eventually will take a better job somewhere else. We have to inspire people. We have to give them that sense of cause and vision that their work is worth more. We have to make them feel like they matter and feel like they're seen and heard and understood. And what ends up happening is those people are not only more motivated and inspired, but if they're offered a better, higher paying job somewhere else, they turn it down. Because it's not just about the bonuses and the money. It's because they would rather be here with these wonderful people.
So ethical fading is a really amazing and fascinating social phenomenon. Basically what it is when a group of people make unethical decisions believing that they are still consistent with their own ethical framework. In other words, they don't think they've done anything unethical, right? Extreme examples of this would be things like a pharmaceutical company raising the price of an essential drug 500%, 800%, 1,000%, 5,000%. And though it may not be illegal, it's highly, highly unethical, and yet they don't think they've done anything wrong. That's an extreme example, but we see ethical fading happen all across companies all the time, where we do things that we know are good for us, where we might lie to our customers or our clients, for example, or we might lie to each other to get ourselves ahead. These are all demonstrations of ethical fading. The way in which ethical fading happens, as you said, one of the ways is just a ridiculous, unbalanced amount of pressure on short term, which forces us to think about ourselves or only think about that short term goal. And then we can rationalize, well, everyone's doing it. It's what the company wants me to do. How else am I going to get ahead? I have to put food on the table. It's the system. It's, we can rationalize the behavior. Also the slippery slope. We do something a little bit once, it worked. We do it a little more, it works. We do it a little more, it works. And before you know it, you have full-blown ethical fading. And so the way you combat ethical fading, and like I said, I gave you an extreme example of the pharmaceuticals, but we see low-level ethical fading across a lot of companies, unfortunately. And the way you combat it is one, good leadership, where that kind of thing is not tolerated. So for example, it's totally normal for people to have unethical ideas. But the question is, when do they get caught? So in an unhealthy company, that unethical idea is implemented until social pressure or the law intervenes, or there's a scandal, right? And then we say, oh, we're terribly sorry. We're a very good company after you got caught. In a properly ethical company, somebody may raise the idea in a meeting, and everybody in the meeting will go, that's funny, but we would never do that here. That's not us. That's a little bit unethical. And it gets shut down immediately. And again, that's good leadership, because it's the leaders who are promoting people who are ethical, who are highlighting ethical behavior and acting in a way that sets the tone, and they're not putting undue pressure on people to break the rules in order to make the numbers. A lot of leaders, unfortunately, when confronted with toxicity or unethical behavior, they'll shrug their shoulders and say, I know, but the numbers are so good, and they allow it to happen. And so one of the primary ways in which you beat ethical fading, quite frankly, is good leadership. But the others are just cause, trusting teams. All of these things contribute to operating in a highly ethical way.
So in the mid-1980s, a philosopher and theologian by the name of Dr. James Carse articulated these two types of games, finite games and infinite games. A finite game is defined as known players, fixed rules, and an agreed-upon objective. Football, baseball. If there's a winner, necessarily there have to be losers, and there's always a beginning, middle, and an end, right? Then you have infinite games. Infinite games are defined as known and unknown players, which means you don't necessarily know who all the players are, and new players can join whenever they want. The rules are changeable, which means every player can play however they want, and the objective is to perpetuate the game, to stay in the game as long as possible. Turns out we're players in infinite games every day of our lives. Right? There's no such thing as winning global politics.
There's no such thing as winning marriage. You can't be number one in your marriage. You can be number two, but you can't be number one, right? There's no such thing as winning education. Nobody wins learning. You can come in first for the finite amount of time you're at school, where we agree upon the time frame and the metrics, grades, but nobody wins education, and nobody wins business. Like when Circuit City went bankrupt, Best Buy didn't win anything, right? But if you listen to the language of so many leaders...
Half the room doesn't know what Circuit City is.
I know, it's sort of, I realize that. It used to be a company that competed with Best Buy. Same thing. Big box store, went in, bought a VCR. You don't know what a VCR is.
Right.
What I love about these definitions is that when we listen to the language of so many leaders, it becomes abundantly clear that they don't know the game they're playing in. The number of leaders who talk about being number one, being the best, or beating their competition, based on what? Based upon what agreed upon metrics, timeframes, or objectives. And this is a problem because when we play with a finite mindset in an infinite game, when we play to win in a game that has no finish line, there's some consistent and predictable outcomes. The big ones are the decline of trust, the decline of cooperation, and the decline of innovation. So now let's translate that to a policing organization, right? An infinite game is not the absence of finite games. It is the context within which finite games exist. Clearly, you are engaged in finite things every day of your career. You have a project that you need to complete. There's a beginning, middle, and end. If someone has committed a crime, you want to try and catch that person. There is a known objective. There's a beginning, middle, and end. There's going to be a winner, and there's going to be a loser, right? If somebody, you're chasing somebody down for a moving violation, for example, these things are finite. But policing and the organization of the Orange County Sheriff is an infinite organization. We hope that this organization outlasts everybody here and thrives beyond everybody here. So the decisions we make and the way we conduct ourselves have to be considerate of the fact that we want this organization to thrive for the long term.
A finite game is known players, fixed rules, and an agreed upon objective. Football, baseball. There's always a beginning, middle, and an end, and if there's a winner, necessarily there have to be losers. Then you have infinite games. Infinite games are defined as known and unknown players, which means new players can join any time, and you don't necessarily know who all the other players are. The rules are changeable, which means every player can play however they want, and the objective is to perpetuate the game, to stay in the game as long as possible. Companies come and go, and yet the game continues with you or without you, and there's no such thing as winning. Nobody wins business. It doesn't exist. But if you listen to the language of too many leaders, it becomes abundantly clear they don't always know the game they're playing in. They talk about being number one or being the best or beating their competition. Based on what? And I love it when executives come to me and say, we are number one. And I always say, for now. The idea of building a company that can survive every single employee in this room after you've long gone, and that company remains true to its purpose, is a very, very powerful thing. The Walt Disney Company, the purpose that Disney founded, and they've gone through, trials and tribulations for sure. For the most part, when they are at their natural best, they harken back to their founding purpose. And I love that. You ask me, is it essential? Depends on what kind of company you want to run. If you want a company that can continue to innovate and set the course for what business should look like, define what innovation looks like in your industry, then build that company. But if you want to build a company that just sucks the life out of people who work there, and it does damage to the communities in which we work, all in the name of short-term gains, you can build that company too. It'll come at a much steeper cost in terms of love, loyalty, et cetera, et cetera. So purpose is always idealized, right? Like, as I said before, I imagine a world in which, right? I know I'm not going to get there. Like when Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. Like one day little black children will hold hands on the playground with little white children, right? Like all of these things, they're all strivings. And the milestones that we pass make us feel like we're making progress. And that's why metrics are really important and milestones are really important. And the most important thing is context. There's nothing wrong with quarterly numbers or annual numbers. The only question I would ask is, to what end? To what end? Like, I was talking to a young entrepreneur last night, and she's looking for investment. And one of her potential investors said, how long is it going to take you to hit $100 million revenues? And I said, don't take that person's investment. Show me one article, one. I just need one. Show me one article in HBR, one study, I don't care, that demonstrates that hypergrowth or high-speed growth is good for the company on any level. The answer is there are none. The pressure comes from that person trying to achieve their financial goals. So they put pressure on you to make your short-term goals, right? And so there's nothing wrong with goals as long as we understand the context and the purpose of that goal, right? I like to think of money like fuel, right? And a car is the company, and the purpose is the destination, right? And if money is fuel, it makes the car go. You absolutely have to have money to make the company go. There is no dreaming big if you have no fuel. You can have the most beautiful car in the world, and yet if you got no fuel, it's pointless. But we don't own a car to buy fuel, right? We don't have companies simply for the money, right? It's the destination. You want to be able to go somewhere. And the passengers are the employees, and they're excited, not about the fuel in the car. How much fuel do we have? No one gets excited by that. We get excited where we're going. We're going to Alaska. Are we near? And that's the analogy. And when there's a roadblock, if you're only driven by the metrics, then the way we think about money, the way we think about corporate goals is the same way we think about our goal is to drive 200 miles a day. Our goal is to make X amount of money, right? That's how we think about it. Well, what happens if you drive 150 miles? Is that a problem? What happens if there's a roadblock? Do you know what to do? You start freaking out and panicking because you're going to miss your numbers. Where purpose-driven companies that know their destinations in the idealized state, they take detours. And to the outside world, it looks like you're going sideways or slowly, but you know you're just going around. And that's how companies actually look. You know, it's circuitous and messy. And purpose helps us keep focused on the very far distant future, so we know we're going in the right vector, even if somebody can't tell we're going in the right direction. And so people have to understand the purpose of the goals you're setting and how they're contributing to something. And start talking, like we and our P&L, I don't have the word profit on my P&L. It doesn't exist. On my P&L, it says freedom. I damn well want more freedom this month than I had last month. Right? Freedom to say no to things I don't want to do. Freedom to give it away. Freedom to take care of my people. I want freedom because profit means nothing. So I'm trying to contextualize all of these words that have no inherent magic to them. So yeah, think of money like fuel, and fuel drives your purpose. Be purpose-driven and talk about the place you're trying to get to and talk about the world that you imagine. And you damn well better make a lot of fuel to get there, because it's going to be expensive and it's going to take a long time.
Any participant in any industry can get lazy when there is little change in how that industry operates. And then when there's a sudden change to how the industry operates, everybody gets angry, panics, and points a finger. I'll give you an example. Okay? I'll give you two examples. Example number one. Taxi companies around the world hate Uber. Right? Now, here's the reality. The app that calls a car, not proprietary. You can call a taxi with an app, right? Paying with your phone, not proprietary. Any taxi can do that as well. The reason Uber is eating taxi companies for lunch is because it's a better product. And the taxi companies around the world could have a shitty product because you're the only game in town and we had no choice. And now you have a competitor, and instead of competing, you're getting angry. I would gladly take more cabs than call services if I got in the cab and he said hi and it was clean and I had a nice chat with him and he wasn't on the phone and he wasn't smoking and all of these things and I had some leg room. I'd gladly. It has nothing to do with the app, the pay mechanism. It has to do with the fact that Juno and Lyft are just better. It's just a better experience, better product. That's why I take them. It costs $1 more. Whatever, I'll pay for it. It's not even a price thing. I have no idea if it's cheaper or more expensive. I actually have never compared. The same goes for Starbucks, right? So there was a lot of people hate Starbucks because they put mom and pops out of business, right? The reality is the complete opposite. That when Starbucks moves into a neighborhood, mom and pop's coffee shops actually do better for two reasons. One, Starbucks attracts more customers, so there's just more people. And the second reason is there is a groundswell of giving back to the local, and so more people go to the mom and pop, right? The ones that go out of business are the ones that refuse to compete. I'll give you a real life example. This goes back a few years. A real life example. I'm lactose intolerant, right? So I don't have milk in my coffee. And there was a time where it wasn't a foregone conclusion that every coffee shop had soy milk or almond milk or something. So I would always go into the mom and pop that was across the street from Starbucks, always go into the mom and pop and I'd say, do you guys have any soy milk? And they go, nope. I go like, thank you. And I would walk out. Those went out of business because I went to Starbucks. He's right, I went to Starbucks. Now, had Starbucks moved in and they went across the street and said, let's see what Starbucks has, we should offer soy milk. Maybe it's time for us to replace this ripped couch that we've had for 15 years because it's really nice across there and it's really gross here. It's the ones who got angry and refused to compete that went out of business. I think retail's the same. Everybody's pointing fingers instead of saying, we've had it really good for a bunch of years. And the question is now, what is our competitor revealing about our own weaknesses that we can learn to improve? Because that's what competition does. Competition reveals your weaknesses to you. And when you had no competition, you didn't know where you were weak. This is the problem with being the best at anything. Because you don't know where your faults are, and then somebody undermines you because they can see your faults before you can.
No one is born with self-confidence. Zero. Right? Every single one of us, our self-confidence was determined by how we were raised, the parents we had, the teachers we had, the bosses we've had, the jobs we've had. My sister worked for a company for 17 years, and her boss destroyed her self-confidence. She came out of that job, and she didn't realize until she got into her new job how afraid she was to make decisions because of her boss. And it took a while for her to get her confidence back. And so if somebody's insecure, we have to over and over and over again prove to them, because we don't know where they came from. We don't know what kind of trouble they got in before for being honest, right? Or how they were raised. We don't know. And so we have to have total empathy and just prove to them that if they make a mistake, they're going to get helped, not hurt. They're going to get supported, not yelled at. And the first time they won't believe you. They think it's a game. They think it's a con. It's a trick. The second time, maybe. And we just have to keep at it. That every time, I used to have somebody on my team who would regularly lie to me, right? Because she would rather lie to me than tell me that she made a mistake. And if I saw the lie, I would ask so many questions to get her to say to me, I screwed up. I'd be like, well, this doesn't make sense. Because I can't say you're lying to me, right? I'd just say, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. If this adds up to this, then why is it that? And the lie would get bigger, and then she would yell at me about how I don't trust her. And then at the end, I have to be like, listen, it clearly doesn't add up. I'm okay if it doesn't add up, if you made a mistake. Just tell me, and I'm good, and we'll move on. But when you deceive me, I'm going to ask you so many questions to get to the truth that it's going to get worse and worse and worse. I had to have that conversation with her probably 50 times before little cracks started to show, where she showed up to me once where one number wasn't there, and she looked at me and said, I made a mistake. And I went, cool, thanks. Alan Mulally puts it brilliantly. He says, you have a problem. You are not the problem. Right? So if something goes wrong, we have a problem, but you are not the problem. And that's the point is, we've too many times told people that they're the problem. So I think it's just going to take time and patience, and you have to do the hard work of helping that person build up their confidence again.
Human beings, we can't help ourselves but compare ourselves to others. And comparison is the deadliest thing we can do to ourselves, because we will always come up short. And
Right.
all it does is exaggerate all of our insecurities. It's okay to enjoy other people's success, but you let them live their lives and you live your life. Oh, and by the way, they're curating their social media. That's not really their life. And so you're making decisions based on how you feel, based on their curated things. I know, I've talked to so many millennials. I know somebody who's out of work, really depressed, and yet she goes and does all these things so she has the appearance of this amazing, successful life. And so now she may be making those decisions based on what her friends, who knows what sort of weird, twisted, exaggerated, circle of depression this is forming. So go back to the rules of the infinite game. Your friends are there to admire. Your friends are there to say, God, I'm so happy for them. What are they doing that I can learn from? I'll give you an example. So we can all fall into this trap. So, in my business, authors and speakers and folks like us, we're all comparing ourselves to each other, and sometimes it can get silly and competitive. And there was, sometimes I go on Amazon and I check the rankings of my books to see that I still have a job. And now and then there was this one author who I hated for no reason. He's very smart. His work's incredibly good. He's incredibly well respected. I respect him, but I hate him. And I would check the rankings of his books. And when I was ahead, I'd be like, yes. And when he was ahead, I was like, right? It would drive me crazy. And I had this weird abstract competition. Same thing, right? Social media happened to be Amazon rankings.
Right.
And I would check in all the time. I'd always check in, mine, his, nobody else, just mine and his. Anyway, we were, I was at an event and we were interviewed together on the same stage. And the interviewer decided to let us introduce each other. So I went first. I had to introduce him. And this is what I said. I looked at him and I said, you make me very insecure. I said, because all of your strengths are all of my weaknesses. And every time I see you do well, it just reminds me what I'm bad at. That's how I opened up. He turned to me and he said, funny, I feel the same way about you. And now we love each other. Because I realized that he's really good at what I'm bad at. So by me getting to know him and really learning to love him, I'm realizing I'm getting better at those things. And I'm taking more pride in the things that I'm good at rather than thinking I have to be good at everything he's good at. Right? So it's healthy to grow our own strengths and rather than be intimidated by the strengths of others.
Let's be crystal clear what a trusting team is. We've all been on one in the past, and I hope you're on one right now. We've all been on trusting teams where we have psychological safety to say out loud, I made a mistake, or I need help, or I don't know, or I've got some stuff at home and I'm struggling and it's affecting my work product, and I need help, without any fear of humiliation, retribution, or that'll affect your promotability. That's what being on a trusting team is, and that's what we have to build for the people who work for us. Not being on a trusting team, we've also all been there, unfortunately, where we're afraid to say, I made a mistake. We would never say, I don't know something or don't understand something. We would never ask for help because we're either going to get humiliated publicly or we're going to affect our promotability. And the opportunity to build trusting teams is what leadership is all about. That's where the strength of culture comes from. So yeah, it's essential to building any kind of business, short-term or long-term. But definitely a long-term company, for sure. And all the stuff you talk about, challenging and pushing boundaries, means if you're pushing boundaries and you're thinking big, you're going to fall a lot. It happens. There's no such thing as innovation without experimentation, and experimentation inherently requires failure. And I think a lot of companies that are too finite-minded, they fear failure. They fear, well, let me restate. I actually don't like the word failure. You hear it a lot, which is, we have a fail-fast culture, I think the problem with the word failure is it's like the word cancer, which is there's a huge difference between stage 4 liver cancer and melanoma, and a mild melanoma. But they're both called cancer. That's the problem. And there are failures which are minor and overcomable, and there are failures that are catastrophic. But the problem is they're both called failure. I like the word falling. Failure we should work very hard to avoid. But falling we should encourage because you can get back up. I know of one large gaming company, and I love this, that they don't have parties when they hit their goals. They have parties when they fail. They have parties when a game is a complete blowout, because they're trying to acculturize being comfortable with missing a goal or complete abject failure. And they have a party and they have their own champagne, which it has a label on it. Their own label, I think it's called, they're called lessons. And on the back of the champagne bottle after the party, they actually write the lessons they learned from the failure. And so it's a company that's very comfortable with failing, which means they try again very easily, and they're super innovative. So creating a culture where falling is part of the game, I think is wonderful. It has to be celebrated. I love it.
Passion is not an input. Passion is an output. Passion, we're all passionate. We're just not all passionate for the same things. And we will feel what we call passion when we are involved in something that is deeply personal to us, that is helping us advance some higher purpose or cause. Then when we go to work, what we experience is passion. But if you make us do something that we feel no personal connection to, that is not us helping advance any kind of bigger ideal, then what we feel is stress. Now, passionate people work many hours, they don't come home, they miss their families, they take business trips, they don't sleep, and yet it feels worth it. People who are stressed go on business trips, they miss their families, they work long hours, they don't sleep, but it doesn't feel worth it. Passion is an output, not an input. Like stress is an output, not an input. So you can't do what you're passionate about. You find something you believe in, and what you will experience is passion. So then it begs the question, how do I find what I believe in, right? I think society, especially our society, and especially for a younger generation, puts overwhelming pressure on us to have a vision. What's your vision? Or find your bliss, or all of these, they're all the same thing, right? And the problem is we're not all visionaries. It's unfair. It's an unfair standard. That's like telling everybody to be creative, but we're not all creative. Or everybody be good at math, but we're not all good at math. We're not all visionaries. Only a small percentage of our population are actually visionary. You don't have to have a vision. You have to find a vision, right? If you hear Martin Luther King say, I have a dream that one day little black children will hold hands on the playground with little white children, you go, that's what I want. You choose to follow Dr. King. When you hear the words of visionaries, and if they appeal to you on some visceral level, they give you goosebumps, they make you excited, they make you want to sacrifice, be a part of it, stand in line to hear them, pay money, whatever it is, follow that, make that your vision. Take it and say, that's my vision too. You can adopt someone else's vision and make it your own. That's what we call a following. Is we have taken the visionary's vision and we have chosen to follow that vision ourselves. We are followers. That's a good thing. There's no difference between the visionary and the follower. We both see ourselves in service to something bigger than ourselves. Whether you are the originator of that idea or not is irrelevant. What it does is fuel passion. What it does is fuel conviction. So we don't have to have a vision, but we do have to find one. And so read books, watch TED Talks, read articles, be in life. Watch videos, go out, seek, find, listen to leaders, corporate, political, whoever. And when something resonates with you, even if you don't know why, that then you can adopt. And you can take it upon yourself to use your own talents, your own gifts to help advance whatever that cause is. Right? So I have a cause. I have a crystal clear vision of the world I want to live in. I imagine a world in which the vast majority of people wake up every single morning inspired, feel safe at work, and return home fulfilled at the end of the day. The gift that I have committed to help advance that cause is the ability to put some of these ideas into words that other people can relate to. When you do a jigsaw puzzle, the first thing you do is lean the box against the wall. Right? We all have a piece of the puzzle to help build this vision. My piece of the puzzle is I'm the guy that points at the box. But I'm not the guy who builds the business. Because there are other people who are better at that, the entrepreneurs and the business leaders. I want them to embrace the same picture on the box. The people who work for companies who say, I want to work for a company that does that. That's their piece. The one who's a gifted natural leader who cares. We all have at least one friend who, for whatever reason, love us and care us even when we're horrible people. That for some reason they still believe in us and they see the good in us. That's their piece of the puzzle. And so we have to commit our gifts. The reason they call them gifts is because they're forgiving. That's what gifts are. They're for giving away. If you have a gift, it's not something you take, it's something you give. So I think we have to find a vision and commit our gifts to help advance that vision. And the great leaders are the ones that can put that vision into words so clear that we can then recite that vision as if it were our own. The human brain cannot comprehend the negative. It is incapable. Yes, it's true. I'll give you an example.
I believe you.
Okay? No, I'll give you an example. You don't have to believe me. I'll prove it. Okay? The human brain cannot comprehend the negative. You ready? Don't think of an elephant. Oh. I know. You can't tell the human brain not to do something, right? And so what happens is we very often reinforce things when we put things in the negative, right? I can't get apart. I can't get apart. I can't get apart, right? Or I can't do this versus I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep doing this, right?
And it's such a huge thing to convert things into the affirmative. You're supposed to do it with children as well. We're supposed to say, instead of saying to children, don't eat on the couch, we're supposed to say, eat at the table. Right? We tell people what we want them to do, not what we don't want to do. Pilots know this, right? It is well known in the pilot community that when you tell a pilot, don't hit the obstacle, they'll hit the obstacle. Because what they're doing is focusing on the obstacle. Skiers know this. If you ever seen skiers go through trees, do you know how they do that? It's very easy. It's actually surprisingly easy. If you go through trees on skis and you go, don't hit a tree, don't hit a tree, don't hit a tree, guess what you're watching? You're only looking at trees. All you're doing is seeing trees. You don't understand how anyone can ski with all these trees, right? As opposed to follow the snow, follow the path, follow the path. The only thing you see is the path. Skiers know this. If you say don't hit a tree, you'll hit a tree. You won't be able to find a path because all you see is millions of trees. If you say only follow the path, you actually don't see any trees. There's actually very sparse trees. There's plenty of path, there's plenty of snow. It's the same thing for you. If you focus on the obstacles, all you will see is obstacles. If you focus on the path through the trees, all you will see is path through the trees. It's your choice how you choose to perceive your own career. It's literally perspective.
Can you, off the top of your head, can you think of, you compared, the finite mindset to some things with law enforcement.
Sure.
As far as infinite, can you think of anything off the top of your head where you could relate that specifically to what we do and what that might look like?
Anybody who's wearing a uniform here knows this because you've had this experience in your career, right? Which is treating someone with dignity. That's right. Treating someone with dignity has nothing to do whether they are guilty or innocent, right? That everybody here knows that when you treat somebody with dignity, the way they respond to you, even if they've committed a crime and they're sitting there in handcuffs, is very, very different than when we don't treat them with dignity. So for example, treating someone with dignity may look like somebody gets pulled over for expired tags or something and they've got a warrant, I don't know, and you have to tow their car, right? So you call a tow truck, and now somebody who's maybe financially struggling, you've just put at least $300 more that they have to deal with. Or treating them with dignity is like, hey, I gotta tow your car. Before I call a tow truck, do you want to call somebody? You want to call a family member or something who can come here and get your car? That'll save you $300, and help you out, And if you can't call somebody, I'm going to have to tow it, right? That's treating someone with dignity. And everybody here knows that when you treat somebody with dignity, sometimes you're taking them to jail and they thank you. And the way in which people respond to the uniform, if treated with dignity, has nothing to do with breaking the law or being put in handcuffs. It's human being to human being. And so I think in a law enforcement, when law enforcement is conducted in a policing organization, you're thinking about the longevity of the value of the uniform. You're thinking about the relationship of those who wear the uniform in public, how much the public is willing to help us if a crime is committed, and we go to the public and say, can you help us? And their willingness. Those things are determined right now on a day-to-day basis, right? And you asked before about building of trust, right? There's no big thing you can do that builds trust. Trust is built up with lots and lots and lots of tiny little innocuous little things. Think of it like your own relationship. Like, have you ever been in love? The person who fell in love with you, there wasn't like, I bought you flowers on Valentine's Day, now you love me, right? That's not how it works. It's like, I went to the fridge to get myself a drink and I got you one too without you asking. I woke up in the morning and I said good morning to you before I checked my phone. There was a game on and you said, honey, can I talk to you? And I paused the game and said, what's on your mind? Right? I'm being idealistic. I mean, my point is no one of those things made someone fall in love or trust you, but it's the combination and accumulation of all those tiny little individually innocuous things that we say, I believe you and I trust you. Now imagine an entire organization where we're just trying to do our job, we just have to enforce the law, we just have to do these things, these are the rules, this is how we do it. But the manner in which we conduct ourselves, each one innocuous unto itself, over the course of time, builds tremendous trust with an organization and the community, so that when you need to pull from that trust bank, when you need to make a withdrawal, that's it, right? Because something's gone really horribly wrong, and maybe there was somebody who acted illegally within the department, that you get to say to the community, we screwed up and I need your help to be patient. They go, you're good, you're good. But that trust is earned. We, like many, made most of our money from in-person and live events and workshops. And of course, that instantaneously disappeared. And so we, like many, were forced to pivot. And we took advantage of online learning. But we wanted to do it consistent with our own values. We did live classes because we wanted to retain some sort of human connection as opposed to just on-demand classes. We called up people who we knew, whose work we admired, and we said, "You're struggling too. Why don't you come and share your genius on our platform?" And it became a very cooperative thing. But there's a few tactics that I learned to get from A to B that were really helpful that I never would have done if I didn't have that extreme pressure. So one of the things we did is we shared with the team the vision, which we had, and then we said to the whole team, we can't do this alone. This is literally a team effort. And so what I want 15 ideas from each person in the next 48 hours about how we can deliver on that vision. And the team freaked out. 15 ideas in 48 hours? And if they wanted to work in teams, I was fine with that. And the reason for that is the pressure, if I gave them 3 weeks, well, they would have all done the work the 48 hours before anyway. So, so that was academic. But the important thing was the reason for 15 ideas is because if I only asked for 2 or 3 or 3 or 4, those would be the same ideas I came up with. And it's the ideas that 11, 12, and 13 that were the brilliant ones. And when we came together to report out, we did it in sort of a unique way. I sort of gave this little speech where I said, okay, this is not a competition. This is about contribution. If one person has 6 amazing ideas and you have none, instead of being angry, say thank you, because they just saved your job because they had a great idea. Also, what I learned is that there's a difference between somebody who has an idea and somebody who's good at executing an idea. And the reality is the most creative people in the team that could come up with the ideas weren't the best at executing them. And the ones that didn't have that many ideas, they were great at executing ideas. So it became really interesting to see who were my creators and who were my executors from that one meeting. And we played Boggle rules. If you've ever played the game Boggle, if somebody else has your word, you just skip over it and move on. I said, if somebody says your idea, don't bother saying, well, I had that idea too. I'm not keeping score, I don't care. Simply move on and tell me something else on your list. And we only let people report out 2 or 3 ideas at a time. That way we could sort of get a flavor. And what ended up happening was people would build on the ideas that they heard. And the set of ideas that we had at the end became our ideas. Nobody could claim them anymore because we'd all sort of tinkered with them. And then we broke them into 3 buckets: green, yellow, and red. A green idea was an idea we could execute with the money we had, and we could execute it within the week. A yellow idea was an idea that needed a little more resource, probably take a week to a month. And a red idea, no matter how good it was too expensive or take too long, and we just parked it and said, we'll deal with those one day. And then we just took all our green ideas and executed them. Listening is not the act of hearing the words spoken. It is the art of understanding the meaning behind those words. When people say, you're not listening to me, and we simply parrot back the words they were said, congratulations, your ears work. That is the act of listening. But the art of listening is creating an environment in which the other person feels heard. I don't want to know that you heard the word. I want to feel heard, feel seen. I want to feel understood. And that is a learnable, practicable skill. So there are many parts of it. It's things like replacing judgment with curiosity. That's a hard thing to do. We're a pretty judgy group. To be curious where someone has a point of view. It's creating a safe space for someone to empty the bucket. So even if we find what they're saying just reprehensible, you're never going to be able to actually have dialogue until at least one of the parties gets the opportunity to say everything without judgment. And once somebody feels like they've completely said everything, then they're more apt to listen to you. But usually what we do is we defend, or we litigate, or we interrupt. We point out flaws in logic, which is just frustrating. And when you point out some flaws in somebody's logic, because we're all imperfect when we speak, and we all choose the wrong words at various times. And that's not what I meant. You know what I meant is what we have to say. Well, what if you know what you meant, then why don't you say what you... You can see how this spirals. But it's things like when somebody says something, and there's really easy ways to do it. Things like, go on, tell me more. What else? And they keep talking. And you go quiet, they fill the space. And tell me more. Go on. And eventually, it's all out. And then there's a safe space for you to respond and express yourself in a constructive way. But that's correct. We
We do not teach listening, and listening is the way to create, to build trust with someone. You know, you make someone feel heard, they'll trust you. You know, it is the way to find common ground in opposition, in simple cases in business, but in more complicated cases in national politics or in global politics or in war. You know, why do, you know, William Ury, who wrote Getting to Yes, he talks about the same thing. He goes, we have talk shows, but we don't have listen shows. He says we have peace talks, but what we really need is peace listens. You know, and he, who's been at the table of at the highest levels of peace negotiations, he said people show up and start demanding what they want, and that's how the negotiations begin. Nobody starts by saying, so tell me why you came here. There's a great documentary that I recommend to learn this. It's called White Right, Meeting the Enemy by Dia Khan. In a nutshell, Dia is a Muslim woman living in the UK who was trolled by white supremacists to the point where the police got involved because her life was at risk. They told her stay away from open windows. That's how bad it got. The way Dia responded was by moving to the United States and going to meet the white supremacists. And she brought her cameras. I mean, you can see it all happen in this documentary. And basically, she gave them a safe space to feel heard. Now, that sounds mad. Like, why should she give them a safe space to feel heard? They should give her a safe space. Yeah, fine, good. You know, like, it's never going to happen. Dia sits down with these white supremacists and she gives them a safe space to feel heard. It's extreme listening. And I say it's extreme because, I mean, they hate her, you know? They don't just disagree with her. They want her off the planet. And she lets them empty their bucket, as she calls it. And then conversation begins. And because they feel heard, they start to trust her. And as they start to trust her, she becomes a friend. And then it creates this paradox where I'm supposed to hate this woman, but I trust her and consider her a friend. And what you see is one by one, these white supremacists, these diehard white supremacists, start dropping out of the movement because they can no longer reconcile their beliefs with reality. And if it can happen in this extreme environment, then it can happen anywhere. And all that is required for us to cross political divides or, you know, disagreements at work and things like that is one of the parties has to learn how to listen. It doesn't even require both parties to learn the skill. That's the amazing thing. And it is one of the most remarkable skills that anyone can learn. The power of listening. Yeah. So the documentary is a great extreme example of what it can do.
The infinite game is not the absence of finite games. You can absolutely have arbitrary goals. And remember, most of the financial goals we set, a few people sat in a room and said, what do we want our annual goal to be? And somebody says, let's make it this number. And somebody goes, no, let's make it this number. And that becomes the number, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing. In fact, it's necessary. Human beings are very tangibly driven animals. We like counting things. It's actually important. Can you imagine running a marathon without mile markers? It would actually be unnerving. So metrics help us measure speed and distance, which is very, very important. But we have to remember that when we hit a metric or don't hit a metric, the game has not been won or lost. They're markers, right? And that's the important part. So we have to stop thinking about business like a race or a game and start thinking of it like a lifestyle. So for example, I want to be healthy, right? So there are many things I have to do to be healthy. I have to eat right, I have to exercise, I have to, get enough sleep, I have to nurse my personal relationships. There's probably 15 or 20 other things. Can't do all of those things well all the time. It's a striving. Same in business. We have, we have product, we have marketing, we have sales, we have leadership. Can't do them all right all the time. It's a striving. But we can set arbitrary goals like I want to lose X amount of weight by X date, right? And every day I'm going to stand on the scale. Some days I'll feel good and some days I'll feel bad. And when I hit my goal, I'm excited. But the problem is I have to keep exercising for the rest of my life. Like it hasn't ended simply because I hit a goal. And that's important to recognize. But what I find more interesting is what happens if you miss the goal? And the answer is nothing. Nothing happens. In fact, very often, we just miscalculated the time it'll take to achieve it. So if you're doing all the right things and you see the trend data is on path, and you just lose that weight in a month later or 2 months later, Okay, you're healthier now, even missing the goal, than you were before. The bad news, where it gets dangerous is when we're so obsessed with that goal that I'll starve myself and stop drinking water to hit the goal, and I'm actually unhealthy. And companies do that. So the goals are good, and celebrating the wins are great, and there are wins. That's fantastic. But we have to remember that if we miss the goal, the question is, what's the trend data? Like, are we a healthy company? Are we taking care of each other? And I'll just go back a few years ago. Ginny Rometty, IBM missed its numbers. And Ginny Rometty made an internal video, which of course leaked, made an internal video that was sent out to the entire IBM that basically shit all over the sales team, publicly. And I remember talking to somebody at IBM and I'm like, what's with that video? And they're like, oh, so glad I'm not in sales, right? And basically berated them for missing the numbers. This was the first time IBM had missed its numbers, the first quarter in 69 quarters. And the CEO's response was to berate a team, berate an entire division, right? After 69 quarters, they missed their first one. Guess what happened after that berating of the team and what happened to the culture, and guess how many times they missed it after that? It continued. In other words, it's fine. It's fine to miss it. It's a game. It's a long game. So I think that's where we get confused, which is we become obsessed with we missed our numbers once. Well, we're doing fantastic. You know? So I think that's where it's just about keeping things in perspective. That's where the infinite mindset helps. It's just about perspective. I had 2 fish bowls in my room, and we can calculate, we know the average lifespan. We know our average lifespan. It's, whatever the number is, 78 or whatever it is. So you can actually easily calculate the number of months, weeks, or days that you statistically have left on this planet, right? And so I bought a bag of marbles, and 1 marble represented each week that I have left on the planet. And I filled up the exact number, based on the statistics, in 1 fishbowl. And at the end, it's more inspiring than doomsday. I mean, it's just statistics. Yeah, no. But at the end of every week, I would ask myself, I actually got it down to the day, but at the end of every week, I'd say, was this a week worth living? Did I do something to inspire someone? And it's my own standard. And if the answer is yes, I move it to the other fishbowl. If the answer is no, I throw away the marble because I wasted it, right? And that's why I love the word inspire. I believe it is a standard to live by, and inspiration is how we make other people feel. It's not, did you do something? I did something good today. I gave money to charity. That's not what it is. It's how did I make someone feel, and did they feel that their life is even better, even for 5 minutes, because of their interaction with me, right? And then genuine care, I think, is the second part of it, right?
Inspire the world to lead with genuine heart.
Right, with genuine heart. And again, I think that sets you up for values. And it's proprietary. I've never heard anybody talk about people talk about innovation and, integrity. Like, those are generic words. But genuine heart is something you can own. And so how do you amplify genuine heart? What are the standards of leading with genuine heart? What does it mean to lead with genuine heart? What are the values that mean that? Are you giving out a genuine heart award, to the person in each property who exemplifies? And by the way to do that is to ask their teammates to vote for them, not come from leadership. Like, who inspires us to lead with genuine heart to the degree that we want to be more like our own colleague? Because a peer review is actually more powerful than a review from up on high. Because really we're all working for one person's approval, where a peer review is, my team loves me, and we're not angry when somebody wins that award. I deserve that.
Because I voted for him.
Because I voted for him, right. And it sets a standard for the rest of the team. So I think peer review, where we allow our own people to choose who within our group, who within our team, has inspired us to lead with genuine heart. And the irony is they may not be your best individual performer, but they're probably your best natural leaders. It doesn't necessarily always line up with performance. Leaders need to model behavior, like parents need to model behavior. So for example, I'll give you a company says, we believe in integrity and always telling the truth. and then the phone rings, and an assistant picks up the phone, and the executive says, "Tell him I'm not in." Well, congratulations, you've just sanctioned lying. And so it's one thing to write it on the wall, it's another thing to actually practice the thing that's written on the wall. So modeling the behavior is absolutely essential, because your actions will speak much louder than your words. And the stories do matter. Stories are much more powerful than statistics. What did Stalin say? I'm quoting Stalin. The death of one man is the death of one man is a tragedy. The death of a million is a statistic. Interesting. I think he said it the other way around. The death of a million men is a statistic. The one of them is a tragedy. And I'll give you a real life example, just to put it into. So let's say something like, okay, so COVID ravaged the world. Some would argue expectedly, some would argue unexpectedly, but it happened. And over the course of just over a year, 600,000 people in the United States alone have lost their lives. Many women, children, and fathers, and mothers, and families destroyed by this horrible virus. Okay, that's true, right? Here's story number 2. I know this young woman who lives in Southern California. Her name is Cami Yoder. Cami was driving home from work one day, and she turned the corner and came upon a car accident that had just happened. The ambulance hadn't arrived yet. A 17-year-old driver accidentally hit an 18-year-old pedestrian with her car. The girl was lying on the street, one of her legs at an uncomfortable angle, a 90-degree angle. Cami pulled over her car, got out. Thank goodness she actually knows basic first aid. She performed CPR on the young girl to keep her alive until the paramedics arrived. Eventually the paramedics came, they took over from Cami, and they took the girl to the hospital. A couple of days later, Cami was curious what had happened to her, and she went on the blotter. She went online and found out that the young girl had actually died. Which was more powerful to you, the death of 600,000 people or the death of one young girl in California? And the second one gave you goosebumps. The first one didn't. And that's the point, which is, what's the difference between 500,000 people dead or 600,000 people to 650,000 people dead? It emotionally moves us zero. But when you tell the story of a person who is an example of what happens, if we tell the story of one death of COVID and how it's affected that family, the emotional impact is vastly more powerful than simply relaying statistics and numbers. And so yes, I do believe that part of being a good leader is not just the intent, but part of good leadership is the ability to communicate. Those things I think are inextricably linked. And learning how to tell a story, quite frankly, that captures the value of your work. Because people can relay those stories much easier than they can relay or remember the statistics.
Throughout the organization.
Throughout the organization.
Story gets passed down,
Correct.
sometimes generations.
Generationally. And great organizations, like great cultures, have myth. There's stories that have been passed down generations in nations about the founding. The Marine Corps celebrates their birthday every year. There's debate whether that's actually even their birthday or not. It doesn't even matter, right? And it becomes part of the culture. These stories become ingrained. George Washington and the cherry tree. Yeah, was it a cherry tree? Yeah. They become ingrained in the fabric of the nation. So too do they become ingrained in the fabric of the company. And like religion, like anything, it's the stories that capture the morals and values much better than just writing them on the wall. You can pick your own worthy rivals. You can pick any company for any reason and say they're better than us. What can we learn from them? I'll give you a real life story that really captured this for me, and it's in the book, but I'll tell it to you. I spoke at a education summit for Microsoft, and then a few months later I was invited to speak at an education summit for Apple. At the Microsoft Summit, this is back in the Steve Ballmer days, in the Microsoft Summit, the vast majority of the presentations by the executives spent most of their time talking about how to beat Apple. At the Apple Summit, 100% of the presentations were how to help teachers teach and how to help students learn. One was obsessed with beating their competition, the other one was obsessed with advancing their mission. At the end of my talk at Microsoft, they gave me a gift. They gave me the Zune when it was a thing. This was Microsoft's response to the iPod. And this little piece of technology, I have to say, was really very, very good. It was quite a good little piece of technology. It didn't work on an Apple, so I couldn't use it. That's a different problem. But it was very good. So at the end of my Apple talk, I was sharing a taxi with an Apple executive, and I couldn't help myself. I just had to stir the pot. And I turned to him, I go, you know, Microsoft gave me their new Zune, and it is so much better than my iPod Touch. And he turned to me and he said, I have no doubt. And the conversation was over. Because he understood, this was an infinite-minded organization, he understood that sometimes your competitor will do something better than you, and sometimes you'll be better than them. There's no such thing as winning or losing. There's only ahead and behind. And where Microsoft was obsessed with beating Apple, Apple was obsessed with outdoing itself. And so the great irony is just a couple years after that, Apple released the iPhone. So where Microsoft was obsessing with how to make a better iPod, Apple was on to the next thing, didn't even care. And that's the whole idea, which is absolutely study and learn from the other players. You see, I don't even call them competitors. The other players in your industry. See what they're doing better. Like I said, it reveals your weaknesses and say, we can do better than ourselves. Grow. Eventually, they no longer become worthy of comparison anymore because you advance yourselves. But the whole idea is Apple was thinking about what they could do next, not how they could beat Microsoft to get more market share for an iPod.
So learn from others and how you can be better.
Absolutely. Like I said, their strengths reveal to you your weaknesses, and that's a gift. Millennials were difficult, but this younger generation, they're more activist, which when it's like climate change, we love it. But like when you're like the intern and you're sending an email to the CEO going, I don't think that you, it's like there's other ways to do that. It starts with empathy. It starts with empathy. And we have to understand, it's for better or for worse, the changing nature of what work has become in our lives. If you go back a bunch of decades, it used to be that you got your sense of purpose from church, you got your sense of community from bowling league, you knew your neighbors, you barbecued with them on the weekends, and work, I was loyal to work and work was loyal to me. At some point I'd get a gold watch. Aside, there's an entire generation that when I talk about the gold watch, they have no idea what I'm talking about, right? That's how much the world has changed. And work was simply a place that I made a living to pay my bills. But I still enjoyed it was still loyalty. Over the course of time, church attendance is down, bowling clubs don't exist anymore, we don't talk to our neighbors, we become very insular, and what's happened is all of that pressure is now being put on the office. I now expect my company to be the place where I get my purpose, the place I get my friendships, the place I get my community, the place I get my social life. Now we've also added the place you have to agree with all of my politics, right? That's a new one. And it's even now, especially during COVID, it's gone up even higher, especially for this young group, where you also have to be my therapists, my therapy. I'm going to bring all of my problems to work. And where the idea of emotional professionalism seems to have gone away. You know, where you actually see people sitting in meetings like this, and you're like, what's going on? Having a bad day, right? That's emotionally unprofessional, right? I want you to bring your emotions to work. I want you to bring your whole self to work. But for the same reason that we exercise emotional professionalism in other aspects of our lives, we also do it at work. So one of the struggles of this young generation is they are not equipped on how to deal with stress. They're just less equipped than previous generations for various reasons, including social media, internet, and parenting and all the rest of it. There's many reasons for it, but they're really not good at dealing with stress. They're really bad at dealing with confrontation. They're so confrontation avoidant that they would rather ghost someone than break up with them after dating them for 6 months, right? That they would rather quit their job then ask their boss for a raise. And usually in spectacular fashion, like, you don't value me, you don't pay me enough, you're like, if you just asked, I would have given you a raise, and we love you. But they quit because they're just afraid of the conversation. So they're very intimidated by confrontation, they're ill-equipped to deal with stress, there is an emotional immaturity, emotional unprofessionalism, right? And it's not a good thing or a bad thing, it just is. And so us having empathy and understanding that is important. And so it raises the question, how are they dealing with their stress? Not well. And so there's a new phenomenon that I'm seeing happening in a lot of offices where, especially young people, are finding the one or two the empaths on the team, and they're going to them with all of their problems. And it's not the traditional, I hate my boss, I hate my job. Venting about work is fine, I have no issue with that. But it's, I hate my mom, I don't know what I want to do with my life, when am I going to leave my house, my boyfriend's not working out, my girlfriend's not working out, like every problem in my life on this one or two people at work. And we've had it happen on our team. We had 3 people quit. And I got a little team. I got 3 people who quit because they said they were burnt out. And I was like, I know how much work you do. What do you mean you're burnt out? So I'm like, do you have another job on the side? How can you be burnt out? You know? What I discovered is they were the empaths on the team, and everybody was calling them to unload. They were burnt out because they were taking on everybody's stress, and they were exhausted. They couldn't take it anymore, and they just quit. And when I talked about this publicly, I had a 23-year-old come up to me in one of the companies and said, I do that. And so we have to recognize they are struggling in a changing, chaotic, crazy world right now where there's so much uncertainty in this world. Like the world is always uncertain, but my God, it's war and the country's at each other's throat, and there's challenge and the global warming, and it's just insane, these poor kids. And they have no outlet. They don't know how to deal with it. So it's a challenge for all of us, is how do we hold space for them? And the problem is they don't even recognize when we're doing the right thing for them. That's the hardest part. A lot of anger, but the problem is it's gonna take a bit. Like, we're in a period of extreme flux, and it's not going to settle for a little bit. It's going to be a very bumpy road for the next few years. There's no right answer, and no good deed will go unpunished.
What are the doings that, to your point earlier, that we can learn from? Not competitors.
Yeah.
But what was it?
Worthy rivals.
Worthy rivals.
Yeah.
That are doing that you say, hey, look at that. This could be a good direction.
Well, I think most importantly, and you seem to be doing this, most importantly is you see it as a journey rather than an event. I think the companies that are doing it wrong view it as an event, which is, we have this issue, we are not as diverse as we need to be, and so let's fix that. Flip a switch, go on a hiring binge, ta-da, right? And the problem is that's not how it works. This is a journey of making our organization more representative of the general population. And to say, we have to do better. Just acknowledging that there is room for improvement, I think, is a big part of it. But obviously, where are you looking to hire? Who are you asking to make recommendations? All of these things matter. I mean, it's literally just opening the aperture. One of the things we have to recognize is we all have an inherent bias, which is we look for people who look like us, and to stop doing that. Also go to other companies, ask them who's really good. But the fact that you're treating it as a journey that you will never actually, the point is you'll never actually be perfect. It's going to be a striving for the rest of time, because there's 3 words there. It's diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Belonging comes from your values and your purpose. Diversity comes from what it looks like, but inclusion is how people feel.
Yeah.
So it's one thing to hire somebody, but do they feel like they're valued and included and part of the organization? So all of those are strivings. None of those you'll ever be perfect at. None of those you'll ever complete. But it is a game of constant improvement. I mean, we like to think we're rational. But we're not. The part of the brain that controls behavior
doesn't control rational analytical thought. Rational analytical thought, which is controlled by the neocortex, is not responsible for our decision making, our behavior. And that's kind of interesting. We can rationalize things, we can think through things, but at the end of the day, everybody here has had a gut feeling about something. You know, despite all the advice that we get and all the data that we may get, it just doesn't feel right. There's no part of your stomach that's telling you that. That is a brain function, but it's a nonverbal part of the brain. The rational part of our brains, our conscious brains, have access to the equivalent of about 2 feet of information around us. That's when we access our expertise, that's when we weigh the pros and cons, it's when we think through the problem, it's what we do in the brainstorming session. Our nonverbal subconscious brains have access to the equivalent of 11 acres of information around us. Every movie we've seen, every book we've read, every conversation we've had gets stored somewhere. But we can't necessarily recall it or think about it when we want it. We can't access that information when we want it. So we've all had the experience where you're in the shower, you go for a run, you're lying in bed, and you have an idea. Whatever question was raised or problem was raised in the brainstorming session that you didn't come up with the answer in the brainstorming session, it happens 4, 5, 6, 7 days later when you aren't thinking about it. Your brain won't ruminate about questions that weren't asked or problems you don't have. And so the value of the brainstorming sessions and the conversations and the expertise conversations is to raise the question, to raise the problem, and then to give it some time to allow that subconscious part of our brain to ruminate rather than think is important. That goes back to the cell phone thing again, which is when we're so connected all the time, when we're on our phones from, when we walk out of this room to walk to the subway, to walk to a meal, like when we're constantly connected, we're actually not allowing that time for our minds to wander. We're not allowing for that time for our subconscious brains to solve problems for us. And it makes us, I don't want to say dumber, but it does reduce the quality of the ideas and the solutions that we can have in our lives and for the work that we do. It's very important to just create space in which our minds can just do whatever they do. If you have ideas in the shower, take a longer shower. If you have ideas when you go for a walk, go for longer walks. Go for walks. Leave your phone at home, just go for a walk. These moments are essential. One of the challenges is it's not predictable as to when or which walk or which shower will produce the idea. So unfortunately, you have to just keep doing it. It's like exercise. You just have to keep doing it. It's a lifestyle. We are not as rational as we like to think we are. If we were, we wouldn't make 90% of the decisions we make, but we do. If indeed we are to lead others and step outside our own industry, how do we innovate that? How do we do that? So let's think about innovation for 2 seconds. For millennia, innovation predominantly meant hardware, right? I made a better printing press. Now, the printing press that we have today is basically the same thing that Gutenberg did. It's a thing that goes like this. It goes faster, sure, but it's basically the same thing, right? The airplane is basically the same physics, right? It's 100% the same physics. But for many, many, many years, innovation meant hardware. And hardware is very expensive, which is why the only organizations that could innovate were governments and large companies, right? Because you could afford to. The computer and the internet completely changed that. The invention of the personal computer, and Steve Wozniak, one of the founders of Apple, talked about this. He says, I imagine a day in which an individual could compete against a corporation. The computer allows that, where literally one person can compete against a company. That's incredible. And the speed at which innovation can happen, because innovation in the hardware model is slow and expensive, in the software model, it's fast and cheap, right? So think of your iPhone. The hardware is very expensive. It's over $1,000, which is insane. And when they release it, it actually has software on it that is imperfect. And they know it's imperfect, but they give it to you anyway. And then very quickly, they start fixing it. And the patches start coming out, right? And sometimes it's minor, you don't even see the difference. And sometimes it's major, you get a major overhaul. And eventually, the software gets too big that the hardware can no longer contain it, and then you have to buy a new piece of expensive hardware.
And this is the model that old companies have to learn to embrace. And if you look at the companies that are dominating right now, whether it's Netflix, it's still big, it's had its issues, but it's still big. Netflix, which reinvented film and television. Tesla, which is reinventing cars. Amazon, which is reinventing retail. They're all new companies. They're all Facebook, Google, TikTok. They're all data companies. The old style of big innovation, those companies aren't the biggest companies anymore. They used to be, but they're not the biggest companies anymore. It's data. And it's because of their speed at which they can make change. And so the companies that are struggling are the companies that are trying to simply add data to their hardware model. So if we add a flat screen TV to our car, we're innovative. No. Tesla built an iPhone. Tesla built an iPhone on wheels. What makes that car remarkable is not that it's an electric car. It's that my 2002 Tesla and my friend's 2019 Tesla do the exact same things because the car can update itself. We have all the same features. It's not the old way where, yeah, I don't have those features. I have last year's model, right? That's gone.
We don't trust people to follow rules. We trust people to know when to break them, right? The rules are there for normal operation, and they're perfectly valid. Like, it's good to have sides on the sandbox, otherwise the sand just pours out, right? So the rules give guidance. There's nothing wrong with policies and rules and things like that, but they're guidance. And if something goes wrong, we have to find out why it went wrong, right? So I've told this story a bunch of times, so you can interrupt me if you know it. True story, two true stories about that happened in the Air Force. The Air Force has a very, very simple rule. Do not fly into Iranian airspace. Really easy, right? So there was a KC-135 tanker that was flying in circles, just in a holding pattern, in case someone needs gas, in case someone needs them, right? And the crew accidentally drifted into Iranian airspace. It sets off all kinds of alarm bells, right? Not good. Completely different incident, unrelated, different time. Another KC-135, just coincidentally, was doing the same thing. They were doing donuts in case somebody needed them, and a fighter jet called bingo, which means they ran out of gas. They need gas. And the crew made some calculations, and they wanted to get to him as quickly as possible because he's out of gas. And the quickest way to get to him was to slice through Iranian airspace. Now, on paper, they both broke the same rule. They should both be punished equally, and they should both be punished, right? The reality is only one of those crews was punished. The ones that were idiots. But the crew that made the decision to cut through the space, knowing full well that it was against the rules, knowing full well that they could get in trouble, and it would accept the punishment if it happened, weren't punished because context matters. So the question is why is somebody late 3 times in a row? Is it because they live far away because they're taking care of their sick mother and they've been struggling to get the bus every day because their bus has been, Is it because they're a single parent and they're struggling to get the kids out in the morning to school? Or is it because they overslept because they're lazy? Or because they went partying the night before and they missed their job and you're a pushover, so whatever, they just take advantage of you? I don't know. Could be one of both, And the question is we don't want them to be late, but we understand that they're struggling. So how do we find a middle ground? You cannot be late anymore, but I understand that you're struggling because you can't get the kids out of school. Let's work together to see how we can make this work. Can we change your shift? What works for you? Like, let's work together to make this work. Context matters versus, that this is giving you some nonsense excuse or something. You're like, listen, take some accountability, and that's a different conversation, But to immediately dismiss someone because they were late 3 times, to me, that seems like lazy leadership. Lazy leaders rely on the rules.
There's a great story told by Nelson Mandela. He was actually born the son of a tribal chief. And he was asked by a journalist, how did you learn to become a great leader? And he said, when I was a boy, I remember two things. I remember going to tribal meetings with my father. And I remember they always sat in a circle, and my father was always the last to speak. And if you think he's the most senior person in the room, he's this tribal chief, and he was always the last to speak. You know, we're constantly telling people you have to be a better listener. But at the end of the day, we have to speak eventually, and when we communicate. But I think the practice of being the last to speak when you're in a meeting, we do this all the time. The senior person comes and goes, okay, this is what I think we should do, but I'm interested in what you have to say. Well, it's too late. You've biased the room. It's over. Or you've made people feel that their opinion doesn't matter. I'm tired of the term soft skills. Hard skills are the skills we need to learn to do our jobs, and human skills are the skills we need to be better human beings. And it's the combination of hard skills and human skills that make us very good. And listening is one of those. So I think coming into a meeting, stating a problem, not giving an opinion, and literally be the last to speak, not only do you make people feel like their opinions matter, but you get the benefit of new ideas. You can still make the same decision you wanted to make at the beginning, but you get all that additional benefit. So practice being the last to speak. That's a great lesson.
This is one of the most common mistakes I see of visionary founding leaders, whether it's Sam Walton or Steve Jobs. Like, we know who these people are, Richard Branson, we know who these people are, Elon Musk, right? And one of the biggest mistakes they all make is they think that everyone in the company is as clear on their vision as they are. Because it's clear to them, they just assume it's clear to everyone. And they don't think they need to go through the process of putting that just cause in terms that have nothing to do with the company or themselves. And the work that they fail to do in acculturating the vision outside of them, because they have such outsized influence over the course of the organization. And we talked about courage before. They're the ones who say no to the pressures of Wall Street, for example. Unfortunately, so many of them replace themselves with operators. A visionary replaces himself with an operator. Now, inherently, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Operators can absolutely do a visionary job, but they have to know that it's a different job. And the skill set that they've developed over a 20 or 30-year career, being a CFO or COO, getting really good at it, actually has to change. And so many of these folks replace themselves with their CFO or their COO. And when asked, why did you choose that person? They all say the same thing. I trust them more than anybody. True. They know more about the workings of this company than I do. True. I couldn't do it without them. True. Except for the fact that it's a different skill set. One is up and out, the other one is down and in. And again, yes, a CFO or CEO could take over that CEO role, but have to understand that up and out is now their job, that being in the weeds and in the details and worrying about the short term is no longer their job. And I think we actually do ourselves a disservice in business by thinking of CFOs or CEOs as number two in the company. You know, that many of them think they're in line for the big job. And it's one and A. It's a partnership. It's visionary and operator who it's the push me, pull you. It's the tension of those two skill sets and those two ways of operating, up and out and down and in, that, very, very long term to shorter term, that make an organization highly, highly, highly functional. So one of the things we have to do is you want a visionary person in a visionary job. You want an operator in an operator job. You want to do the hard work of extracting that why, that purpose from that founder leader in terms that are compelling and resonant with everyone else. And you want to make sure that your values are built in and built into your incentive structure, not just performance, but your values as well, so that the organization is equipped to survive that founder leader for a century if necessary or more.
So my why is to inspire people to do the things that inspire them. So together, each of us can change our world for the better. And it's why I wake up every morning, every day. It is the greatest compliment someone can pay me when they say to me, that was inspiring or you were inspiring. Like, that feeds me, you know? And the interesting thing about a why is because it is objective. A why is the sum total of how we were raised. It's born out of the patterns and the lessons we learn from our parents, from our teachers when we're young. And our why is fully formed by the time we're in our mid to late teens. And you only have one why for the rest of your life. It doesn't change. You are who you are based on how you were raised. Now, you may not be acting as your true self. You know, people say that to us all the time. You know, it's like, I don't know who you are anymore, you know? But when you are at your natural best, your why is front and center. But we're not always acting at our natural best, and sometimes we make decisions out of selfishness. We take the job that pays us, that offers us the most money, and turn down the one to work for somebody who would probably be a better mentor. We do these things all the time. And so, can you tweak the words of your why? Of course, but that's semantics. Can we find better ways to bring a why to life? Yes, that's the evolution. But the why itself is fixed.
I mean, you play the infinite game for the good of the game.
Right.
Right? Which is, you're in the hospitality industry for the good of the hospitality industry and for the good of all business. And the best companies, the ones we love and admire, right? They share. It's the ones who are protective, of what because they think it's a competitive advantage. And what they fail to recognize is implementation is the competitive advantage, not the idea itself. Execution is the competitive advantage. Yeah. But the ability to share the things you believe in and the things you have figured out for the good of business. Because we don't just believe your employees should be treated well, we believe all employees should be treated well. And if you figured things out, so I'll tell you a story. So Bob Chapman is the CEO of a company called Barry Wehmiller. It's a company I've written and spoken about quite a lot, especially in my book, Leaders Eat Last.
Great guy.
And you had the opportunity to meet Bob. Bob is one of those unique, remarkable leaders. And the way I met Bob is he'd read Start With Why, and he sent me a letter and saying, I'm building the kind of company that you've written about. And I said, I want to meet you. And so we had lunch in Los Angeles, this famous lunch where we were scheduled for an hour, and we both cleared our schedules and spent the next 3 hours together because we loved each other. And I didn't believe him. I said, I talk about an ideal. It's not realistic. It's a striving. He says, no, I have it. And I said, well, I want to see it to believe it. So he picked me up in his plane from New York, and we spent 3 days flying around the country to all these different factories. And it's a manufacturing company, right? This is blue collar, some union, some non-union manufacturing, right? And what I saw absolutely astonished me. It blew me away. I've never seen anything like it. And he didn't prepare anything. He let me roam the factory floor without I could talk to anybody. I could ask anybody any question I wanted. There was no window dressing. And I was absolutely blown away. And I'll just tell you one quick story that really exemplifies. And this one's, I haven't written or spoken about this one. So this one I haven't talked about this one. So they have a machine that was getting old. This is a factory, big machine.
Yeah.
That's getting old and need to be replaced. Traditionally, how large machines are replaced is somebody in procurement fills out a list of requirements and then goes in the market to find a machine that fits a budget, right? That's usually how it's done. That's not how they did it. They went to the factory floor to the two guys who work on that machine, one who's pretty young, in his early 20s, one who's got more experience. Neither of them have college educations. I think one had a GED. And they said to them, you need to replace your machine. You have a budget of $750,000. Go. And these two guys travel around the country looking at
and never came back.
Exactly. They now live in Tahiti. They gave him a budget, not the money.
That was smart.
They flew around the country. They looked at new and used machines, and the people selling the machines said they'd never seen anything like it. They'd never had anybody show up in overalls climbing in the machine. Usually it's a guy in a suit showing up with a clipboard.
Right.
They ended up spending $650,000, so they were really excited that they saved the company money, and that's their machine, right? I can guarantee that machine will never break down, right? And the trust, and it makes perfect sense, but this is what one of the things that Bob says. Bob says is, we trust people who have college educations who work in a back office, and we don't trust people who don't have college educations. What about their education makes them trustworthy or untrustworthy? He says, I know some pretty dishonest MBAs, and that's one of the things that Bob did. But the point was, I went on this wonderful tour with Bob, and then we finally went back to their corporate headquarters in St. Louis, and the team that had sort of built this culture was sitting around a table, and they were all looking at me like this, going, isn't this amazing? Like, we built what you wrote about. And I sat there and I said, I think you're the most selfish organization I've ever met in my entire life. And they all were sort of stunned that I would say that. I said, look, I think it's amazing what you've built. I think it's absolutely incredible. But how selfish of you that you only offer this kind of thing that you've built for 6,000 people. What about the millions of people who hate their jobs, who don't want to go to work every day? What are you doing for them? And it was from that conversation that Bob opened the doors. They now offer training. They now offer tours. Like Bob, now he wrote a book about it. He's now on the speaking circuit.
Yeah.
He's out there. He's now a public figure. And he's promoting this new way of leading and this new way of thinking. Leader means other people follow what you do. And if your brand stands for something that people want to copy, and you're leading the way, then clearly you are competing against yourself and not them. But let them compete against you. And I think that the Four Seasons is one of those brands. And I can't think of anyone in the hospitality who has ever done that, who's ever reached outside of their own industry that others want to be more like them.
The entire concept of purpose is misunderstood. Purpose has to be pretty specific. I want to make an impact in the world is not being purpose-driven. It's so generic, it's useless.
Right.
That's like saying I want to be happy. Like,
right.
How do you define happiness?
Right.
We were joking in the back. I said the marshmallow experiment. You give a kid one marshmallow and say if you wait, you can have this marshmallow now. If you wait 2 minutes, you can have 3 minutes. And there's wonderful things on YouTube, and you watch these kids stressing out and sniffing the marshmallow.
80% fail.
Yeah,
I eat the marshmallow.
I am a one marshmallow guy.
Yeah.
Right. But as we were talking about backstage, which is, well, how do you define the marshmallow?
Yeah.
And again, it goes right back to context.
Yeah.
And I think we're talking about a much bigger issue, which is our world has become so much more binary. Right, wrong, good, bad, left, right. Everything's become black and white. And the reality is our world, how we actually exist in it, our relationships, our relationship with work, even our relationship with ourselves, what happiness means, it's all pretty gray. And yet we want everything to be crystal clear, and we want switches. We want to turn it off, and we want to turn it on.
Right.
And what I can't help but think, and I'm curious because you're with your students, which is, context and narrative matter so much that when all they're doing is trying to prevent their unhappiness, what they're actually doing is talking only about unhappiness.
Right.
Which then perpetuates unhappiness.
Yes.
And we are very suggestive animals, even to ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, we can talk ourselves into pretty much any feeling we want. And I wonder if it's not the pursuit of happiness that's failing, I wonder, but rather the obsession with the unhappiness that's reminding us constantly of how unhappy we are, so that any strategy, even if they're all the right strategies from the self-help course that I took and the book that I read, they're actually good. It's actually good advice that is destined to fail.
When it's an employee market, I think it sends a message to us that we took a lot of things for granted. People need jobs. We can pay them fairly. We don't have to pay them better than sort of middle. The kinds of things that we can offer them become secondary because we have all the cards, we have all the power, and so I think one of the things it forces us to do is to start looking at what people get from work. The nature of work has changed over the course of decades. Work wasn't the place that we had our sense of belonging. People, if you go back to the 50s or 60s, work was a place you made a living, and you had your sense of belonging and community from literally your community. People were much more active at church. We went to bowling leagues. We were members of Shriners clubs and volunteer groups. Like, we had strong senses of community and belonging outside of work. And over the course of the years, those things have sort of blended. We've seen less engagement in church. The bowling leagues have all but disappeared. And now people are demanding things that they never used to demand from work. Things like belonging, things like what am I being a part of? Like that my personal purpose has to be intertwined with the organization. And so I think companies can start to really look at themselves and say, do we actually have a purpose that goes beyond our financial results? Do we actually have a purpose that people can feel a part of? Do we have metrics that help people see that we're making progress in things other than what we're offering a shareholder or what the bottom line is producing? Are our incentive structures promoting things like teamwork? Is our training going to give you skills like how to communicate and how to listen that will benefit you, of course, at work, but you'll have a better relationship with your spouse and your kids because of what you're learning from your work? And when we're sitting down and talking to people and interviewing and advertising our jobs, are we saying, come work for this great job, lots of opportunity, upward mobility, get a great salary? Or are we saying, we want to make you a better version of yourself? and start looking at some of alternative things that people used to get outside of work that they want from work now. That are we actually building that into our work-life culture? And I say work-life culture as if they are one thing. So I think we can actually. It starts quite frankly by listening, which is call the people who have left and say, "Can you tell me not why you left? Can you tell me what you're leaving for? What are you pursuing?" And then everything they say, don't have an answer. Don't say, well, we already do that. Don't try and fix something. Just say, go on, tell me more. I don't understand. Go on, tell me more. And really get a full picture of what's going on in people's lives and what their ambitions and dreams are. Because I would bet money that that a lot of the things that people feel like they're lacking, that they're looking for, that they're searching for, probably at least some of it, we could help them find at work. But the problem is we don't promote those things, even in our recruitment ads. Why don't we start talking about our vision, our mission, and how we help people grow before we talk about upward mobility, salary, and where you want to work? So I think we can start looking at some asymmetrical things that we didn't used to look at, quite frankly. They've always been there. We just didn't need to look at them. There are many stories of people who, when the odds were against them, whether they came from extreme poverty or abuse, rose up to have successful and happy lives. Right? And when we read about them or talk to them or meet them or hear interviews from them, they talk about mindset. They talk about, my mother taught, he's usually the mother, like my mother taught me that to never be a victim. My mother taught me that I was capable of anything. And so they had a mindset, where some people have a victim mindset and then that's the life they continue to live. Some people have a different mindset and it can lift them out of what we would consider unprivileged circumstances. Right? So, it makes me question then, is mindset a privilege? And we both know people that have every privilege afforded to them, every one of them. And yet, for whatever reason, their mindset is the wrong one and they can squander all of that opportunity, all of those advantages that they've been afforded, and make a mess. So I question whether mindset is a privilege. There are a lot of privileges in life. Mindset, I think, is one of the ones that is there for the taking. My fear is that an over-coddled parent combined with excessive amounts of social media, combined with the addictive qualities of a phone, that there's a generation where too many people in that generation are not learning the skills to deal with stress.
Right.
And we see this with increasing rates of depression and anxiety, and in its worst case, suicide.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Is there a balance that you see in which humans and technology can work together where it's sustainable and there's longevity to that and creates resilience?
Of course,
yeah.
Of course. I mean, that's like saying, is there balance between alcohol and human beings?
Right.
So of course.
Right.
Of course, excessive drinking,
Yeah.
not good.
Not good.
For any of your relationships or your own
Sure.
health. Well, excessive technology, not good for any of your relationships
Right.
or your health.
Right.
Of course there's balance.
Yeah.
And it's about being responsible. We know that other dopamine releasing things like gambling or smoking
Right.
or alcohol,
Right.
that we have laws to help us, but we also know that there's a responsibility that comes with those things. But we don't really talk about the responsibility that comes with technology.
Right.
We've all felt it. You're out with a friend and they're on their phone the whole time. It doesn't feel good.
Right.
You wake up in the morning and the person you live with, checks their phone before they say good morning to you. It doesn't feel good. You're out with a friend, they pull out their phone, you feel stupid, so you pull
Yeah.
out your phone. It doesn't feel good.
Right.
And so it's, I think we have to learn the skill to balance these things because it's a gift to our friends. It's a gift to the people we love. It's not even a selfish thing. It's a service.
Right.
So we start to see learning to find balance of technology in our lives as a service to the people so they feel loved, so that they feel that we're present with them.
Right.
I think it's a better way of treating it as opposed to, I have to get a handle on this,
Right.
but rather I'm going to do it for you. So let's be crystal clear. What vulnerability is actually requires strength to do. It requires unbelievable strength to come into a meeting and say, I'm struggling with this COVID thing. I'm not sleeping, and I fear that I'm not there for you guys, and I'm not sure what to do. I mean, that requires unbelievable strength to be able to say that to someone. And so I let us call it strength to be vulnerable, not weakness to be vulnerable. If we are receiving feedback that we're not being vulnerable, then maybe it's true, and maybe our team is what they're really saying is, please lead us, because we feel that you're not leading us. I mean, I think that's an indication. And if you don't know how to do it, ask for help. Call people up and say, I know I need to do this, and I don't even know the first thing to do. And start small. You don't have to go crazy. And being vulnerable doesn't mean, like you're talking to your therapist in a meeting. It doesn't mean letting it all out. It doesn't mean broadcasting everything. What it means is being honest about the daily machinations. It's totally fine for a leader to say, I don't know what the future looks like. I have a vision. I think I know what it takes to get there, but I know I can't do it alone. I know it's going to take all of us. I think a very, very easy dipping your toe into vulnerability is COVID. To say, I've never gone through anything like this before. And there's a side of me that's kind of figuring it out as I go along, and I need your help and I need your patience. To dip your toe, it's an amazing opportunity COVID has offered, because nobody thinks you're weak saying, I don't know what's going to happen. They think you're being honest. So I think you need to start experimenting, and you need someone preferably in the company who you trust, who can give you guidance. In other words, to call them up afterwards and say, how did that go? You need spies to say, is that being well received? Was I okay?
Yeah.
And even to say out loud, I don't know how to do this. I'm not good at this. I used to think vulnerability was stupid and weak, and I'm learning that it's an expression of strength, and I'm going to experiment with it. Simply saying that is a step to being vulnerable. To simply say, I don't know how to be vulnerable to the team, but I want to try because I know it's important. That's where I would recommend starting. If you have somebody in a leadership position who literally doesn't respect diversity and inclusion, the question is why are they in a leadership position? So it's a bit of a loaded question. Now, I understand the challenges. If you do things with intention, if there's an intention to go out and find something, you're more likely to find it. And I also think what companies with resources can do is build their own bench, which is go to universities, invest in the programs that will train the people, in this case, as you said, some gender diversity, so that they have the skills, and then and offer them the potential for jobs when they come through the program. So you set them up. In other words, build your own bench. Because I've heard this from companies before, which is, we'd love to, but the talent's not there. So go build the bench. If you have a long-term approach to this stuff, it's not about solving a problem in a month. It's about solving a problem so that it's sticky, so that it's not just a reaction, but rather it becomes inculcated and built into the fabric of the company. And I go back to leadership training again, which is what good leaders recognize is that a diverse workforce brings diversity of points of view. If everybody looks like me, went to a similar school as me, was brought up like me, then we're all going to have kind of similar points of view on some of the challenges we face. But when we have people with different racial backgrounds or different genders, some people who grew up in Europe versus America or rich versus poor, they bring entirely new perspectives based on their worldview to a problem. And the more diverse perspectives we have on any challenge means the more options we have to solve that problem. And this is not surprising to me that when you say when we have more diversity, we're actually better at the thing we're trying to do. That makes perfect sense. Let's reinforce that point, because I think it's an important one, that fulfillment is a right and not a privilege. And when we go out with our friends for dinner, or when we used to be able to do that, you sit around and somebody says, I love my job, and everybody goes, oh my God, you're so lucky, like they won something. That statement should be the norm, not the exception. We should all get to go to dinner and say, I love my job, and it's the one person who says, I don't, that we can intervene. So yeah, I believe it is a right, and we have a responsibility ourselves to find a place where we want to work with the people that we would work with, rather than just taking the biggest salary. That we have a responsibility to take care of the people around us, and we have a responsibility to speak up and ask
our leaders to work with us and create a place where people want to come to work, where there's a safe space for us to take care of each other and feel taken care of. So there's mutual responsibility all around. So when you say, how do we do it? Well, it requires constant work. It's like, how do you stay healthy? Well, I can give you a whole list of things you have to do. You have to eat right. You have to nurse your personal relationships. You have to get enough sleep. You have to exercise. You have to meditate. You have to be mindful. There's like 30 things. And you can't do all those things well all the time. It's a striving. And when one's doing well, sometimes one thing falls off. It's a striving, and it's the same. The pursuit of fulfillment is a striving. I think it's, this is why I make the distinction between fulfillment and happiness. To seek happiness is a lot easier because happiness is fleeting. You get a new job, you're happy. You get a raise, you're happy. You win a new piece of business, you're happy. You're given a gift, you're happy. Somebody says something nice to you, you're happy. And that feeling goes away. Nobody walks around with a sense of happiness for a job they got 4 years ago. It's gone. Where fulfillment is different. Fulfillment, you can feel fulfilled by your work even if you're not enjoying it today. You can feel fulfilled by your work even if you're having a bad day, or one of your colleagues is grumpy. You can still be fulfilled by the work. It's more infinite. It's more constant. And so, whereas happiness is, the things that lead up to it sounds more like an event. Fulfillment is a striving. It's a lifestyle. And you do all these things, like having a just cause, like building trusting teams, and working to be the leader you wish you had. In other words, you see your life as a life of service to those around you, whether you're in a company, whether you're an employee, whether you're a leader, or if you're just a parent, that you see your life in service, to your spouse, your partner, or your kids, and indeed your community. What makes a community highly functional is that we view that every single person within that community sees their responsibility to serve the community rather than standing around demanding the community does something for them.
Because you made it this far in a video, I want to celebrate you. Most people start and don't finish. Most people never actually follow through. Most people say they want something, but they don't ever do the work to actually get it. But you're different. You are special. Believe Nation, you made it here all the way to the end, and I love you. So as a special celebration, if you put a hashtag Believe down in the comments below on this video, I will showcase you and celebrate you somewhere on the screen in a future video because you are awesome. For 50 more rules from Marie Forleo, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
So when I was first starting B-School, I was really excited about getting it out into the world, and I went to a marketing conference to network and to meet people and to find promotional partners. And so I was really excited to tell people about the program, and I was on this